work. I'm not sure if everybody's aware of this, but in the Marks foyer gallery, just that main room when you walk in, we do a rotating show every month. So we always have work on display and for sale. I think I've heard a little bit that some people only think we have work for sale once a year during the Arts Festival, but we actually have it up every month. And we do these rotating shows that are a really good opportunity. If anyone's ever interested, they can reach out. We're planning our 23 schedule now. And so the work gets put up, we help you produce a show card, and then have programming, and these events are also free for the public to attend. And then we also have the gallery spaces that are here at City Hall. You'll see the artwork in the hallways. Some of it's part of the city's permanent collection, but the rest is for sale. And then we have work at the airport as well, and we are going to be doing a new call for art for the airport this winter. The work that's been up is been up for almost a year and a half at this point, so we're going to do a little bit of a transition soon here. So something to keep in mind about our website is we have different resources available on there. All of the rental information and work that's for sale is up on the website, but we also have any of our ongoing projects up. So currently the public art proposal application is open, so that's kind of the things you see around town. The photos are 3 that have gone up this year, so a mural, a sculpture, and a mosaic. And those proposals are not limited to those items, but those are to give you some ideas. So we'll be taking applications for this program this year and going through them and seeing what will be a best fit for possible locations in town. Any questions, feel free to reach out to us, but we just wanted to make sure that opportunity, that the public is aware of that, and we'll be accepting applications through November 1st. The Holiday Craft Fair is coming back this year, December 2nd and 3rd, that first weekend of December, and the registration is open now. It's almost sold out, so that sounds like it's going to be a great event again this year. And then one of our big goals for the arts department is going to be expanding our classes so that they'll be year-round. The past, I don't know how many years, but it's been a while, they've been running January through March. And so we think it would be a great resource to have educational programming year-round over at the Mark. So we'll be spreading those out this year, so there might not be as many classes a week, but there will be something at least twice a month, and we're taking proposals for those now. So the way the classes have been working is we have some classes we know people are interested in, and we're trying to get instructors to help teach those. Requests that have been made over the years, and then we're also open to hearing new ideas. If someone's wanting to teach something, just reach out to us and we'll help you kind of flesh that out. So even if you've never taught before, we can help you through that process. And then Redrock Arts Festival is coming up very soon here. It's going to be October 6th through the 9th. So the festival has changed a little bit this year. In the past, it's largely been a plein air painting competition, and we are still having that this year, but we're celebrating different art forms and really encouraging participation this year. So we have several free workshops we're really excited to be hosting, and we've got some great partners in these. So Sherry Zollander from over at Back of Beyond Books is hosting a poetry workshop, and then there will be a reading at Back of Beyond Books on Sunday evening. Local songwriter and musician Brian Laidlaw is going to be teaching a songwriting workshop that will be hosted up at KZMU, and then the song from that workshop will be performed live at the Street Fest on Saturday, so you can help write a song that's kind of unique to Moab. Desert Sun Ceramics is hosting a family-friendly pottery workshop. That'll be Friday afternoon at their studio, and you can bring your little ones. I think it's up to 3 years old can even participate, so that'll be really fun. And then we do have, so the plein air competition will take place, but we also have 2 free workshops for that as well. Registration is required for those. And then we have film workshops are actually going to start tomorrow. So we've partnered with the Moab to Monument Valley Film Commission on their filmmaking competition. And so in advance, there's 2 free workshops, film filming kickoff is September 23rd, and then all the short films, 10 minutes or less, will be screened at Star Hall on Friday the 7th. And then Saturday we will have the Street Fest again, but we're incorporating a couple other things in that event this year. So the chalk competition has previously been held the week before, but we're going to do it the same week, and we're going to do it in the festival so that everybody can get to see that. There will be booths, food, live music, and then some activities that are all ages again there. So we're pretty excited about the festival this year and kind of trying some new things. All this information and the full schedule is on our website as well. And then we want to be open, and if anybody has any questions or class ideas or is curious about what we have coming up, please reach out, please contact us or come by our office. We'd love to see you.
Questions for Kelly? Thanks, Kelly. You guys do great work. Really appreciate everything you do. It sounds very, very lovely what you've got planned. If people want to rent any of the spaces, can they find that on the website, or should they contact you directly?
Either one's easier for them. If they start at moabarts.org, there is a rental page section, and it will show you photos of this space, but they can also just call and we can start them there.
All right, sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have Ben with a financial department update.
All right. Finance department's updates aren't quite as exciting as art department presentations, but I just dropped my barcode signal. Bear with me. It's been exciting times in the municipal finance world, especially as a resort community. You never really know what you're going to get month to month, and as our sales tax revenues come in, it's always I now know, like, within a 2-day window and the hour, they always send the tax notices at like 8:30 p.m. So I know the time of day and when it's coming in, and then Carly and I always convene when that sales tax revenue comes in. Sorry, I think when Kelly disconnected, for some reason mine did also, but we should be, there we go, okay. So I had three topics to cover today. First was costs related to the flood damage from August 20th. The second was sales tax revenue update. And the third was a fiscal health benchmarking update for the council and the public. So I'll dive right in. Okay, so I wanted to talk briefly. I wasn't going to talk dollar amounts in this because we still have a lot of invoices come in that are yet to come in. We don't really have any final numbers. I just wanted to kind of briefly go over how we're tracking costs associated with the emergency event on August 20th and the subsequent cleanup. So we have 2 active projects in our accounting software. One is for the water line repairs, and then the other one is for just general governmental expenses. It's highly likely that we're going to see and going to require a budget amendment related to this cleanup process. And that is one of the functions of an emergency declaration, is to free up funds from the government entity to essentially to make sure that we have funds available to do that cleanup in an emergency situation. So far, on like a per transaction basis, we haven't exceeded that any spending thresholds. So I mean, there haven't been any emergency transactions as of yet, but it's also interesting that we're also tracking our labor costs for this, and this is all internal labor. The 138,000. This is wages and benefits. So all of these labor costs, save for overtime, which there will be some, are budgeted labor. But there is an opportunity cost for work that's not accomplished as a result of this reprioritization of work. So it's just something to keep in mind. When we talk about the total cost of flood repairs, we will be including all of those labor costs that the city has incurred. And feel free at any time, if you have a question, I'm happy to be interrupted during this presentation. So moving on to our revenue update. So I use the resort community tax as really the key indicator for the city's revenue. As you know, I think we have either 8 or 9 different sales tax revenue sources. And some of them have restrictions and some of them are allocated, like the local sales tax revenue is allocated based on population. Resort community is the key driver for 2 primary reasons. One, it's the city's largest source of revenue. It represents about half of the city's resort sales tax revenues. And second, it's not distorted by any distribution factors. And then third, it's, like I said, it's not restricted, not legislatively restricted. So this is just kind of a general fact, but it's interesting to note that over the last 11 years, it's grown by a factor of 2.5 times. So it's really grown over in the last decade. So I dug into our revenue growth over time relative to inflation. And the reason that I did this is we've heard from the business community that revenue has slowed significantly. And I haven't seen, until July, I had not seen that reflected in our sales tax revenue. And as I attempted to figure out why that was, there's a few different reasons. The first is capacity for the city's really capacity for tourism, for hotels as your room count increases. So room rates may decrease, but the city's revenue could increase because of an increased capacity. And, the number and size of restaurants, kind of digging into that is really outside the scope of this conversation. But I wanted to understand what inflation looked like relative to this growth because, that's another factor. As hotel costs get more expensive, our revenue increases proportionally. And here you can see in all but 2 years since 2012, revenue has far outpaced inflation. And, there's a few spike years there that are interesting, 2015, 2017, and then, of course, 2021 and 2022. Okay, so now we're getting into where we're at year to date. This is probably the most interesting, most relevant. The red line now this is calendar year, not fiscal year. You'll see that it runs January to December. And the red line is our resort community tax through August of 2022. And green is the prior year. So those are the two, they were tracking very close to each other through the early part of the year. And then, of course, since we run a fiscal year, as you know, from July 1st through June 30th, of course, July is the first month when we see a dip relative to the prior year. It was a really deflating moment as a finance director to adopt a budget and then the very next month see that dip. But luckily in August, we saw a partial recovery of that. So it's more in line with where we expected. That little yellow line is our fiscal year 2022 budget. So there you can see the red line is slightly below the yellow line for July, and then it comes back in line in August. And so what that did for year-to-date revenue, so we have this little text box, unrestricted sales tax revenue, and the year-to-date variance. So in July, we were 8.3% below budget. We had this kind of initial reaction of, do we need to start cutting back? Do we need to start making changes? And I'm hesitant to do that for a couple reasons. Primarily because of the pandemic reaction. We have a lot of backlog and work, and so to pump the brakes this quickly we're apprehensive to do that because we have so much backlog. So we wanted to wait and see how the next few months panned out, and so far August is looking like we're starting to see some of that recovery. So there in July, we were 8.3% below budget. In August, it's returned back down to, it was 1% below budget. So the year-to-date value is we're at 4.4% below budget. In the next few months, we'll be continuing to monitor this and analyze this to see if we need to make any budgetary adjustments. But so far, we haven't directed staff to operate any differently than the budget has directed. So, this is kind of an interesting, probably not extremely worthwhile, but it's interesting to see how our revenue has changed over since 2010. Here you can see the big dips are the winters. The small dips in between is the 2 months in summer where we see a slowdown, and then on either side of that of each year, the large peaks are the spring and fall, the busy seasons. And you can see in 2021 how extreme that got in July. That was for May visitation, May of 2021. And even it's kind of hard to see on the far right side there, but we saw a very similar experience. And I think what we're going to be seeing is a normalization of this revenue. So it was trending very normally with moderate increases over time. And then following the pandemic, we saw this real extreme increase. And what I anticipate we'll see is kind of this normalization where it kind of tapers off and follows previous trends. So that's what we're looking at for sales tax revenue year to date. We're 2 months into our fiscal year. The next thing that I wanted to talk about was fiscal health for the city of Moab. So when talking about fiscal health, there's really 4 key things that you're trying to measure. The first of which is cash solvency. That's really our ability to pay our bills in the short term. Budgetary solvency. This is what I mentioned kind of early in that revenue discussion, is ability to generate revenue to pay expenses in the budgetary period. So if we're trending low on our revenue early, then we're concerned about our budgetary solvency. And then long-run solvency. This is the broader sense of municipal finance, and it's our ability to pay long-term costs of operations and infrastructure replacement in the long run. And then the reason that service level solvency is in yellow is because this is another measure of financial condition that falls within this umbrella, but it's not measured as part of these financial metrics that I'm going to be talking about. So one of the goals of the finance department in this budget year is to develop a financial scorecard, basically some objective measurements to say, are we fiscally healthy? And I'm going to be talking about kind of laying the groundwork for that. Service level solvency will actually come later, and that's through measuring department performance. Okay, so fiscal health metrics require comparison. You're either comparing yourself to your historical values or to other cities. And in selecting comparison cities, I had a few criteria that included, it makes the most sense to compare to other resort communities, population size, that they're relatable in some way, and typically that's covered by resort community status. And then I also wanted a healthy mix of in-state and out-of-state communities to compare to. So here we have the list of them. You probably are familiar with most of them. Kind of one out of left field was Bar Harbor, Maine, but had a lot of qualities that are similar to Moab, so it felt relevant. Park City, Springdale, Steamboat, Vail, Durango, Sedona, Jackson, Whitefish, and then Bar Harbor. And if anybody would like to see other communities that you feel are relatable, I can easily add those. It doesn't take much effort, so I'm happy to do that. Feel free to reach out to me at a later time if those communities, if anything occurs to you there. So I'm using a financial model that was developed quite some time ago and then revisited about a decade ago to measure fiscal health. And it's 10 metrics that you use to compare yourself to other communities. And in the end, you develop basically a scorecard to say how fiscally strong you are relative to those other communities. The resort community status does definitely throw a wrench in this, and you'll see that with this first metric. So the first one is governmental revenue per capita. So services to a municipality are generally dependent on the size of your population. However, we know in a resort community, it's dependent on much more than that. It's the size of the visitation, the total number of people that are visiting your community as well. This one was quite interesting to put together in that Moab ended up at the very bottom of that, revenue per capita. Here you can see, I mean, it ranges everywhere from, Vail with a population of 5,600, revenue per capita is 13,000. Springdale is a bit of an anomaly because of the small population size. They actually have a budget quite smaller than Moab, but still they have a revenue per capita of about $8,600. And then down at the bottom, you've got, Whitefish is pretty comparable to Moab in that, right at that $3,000 level. As a point of reference, I put a weighted average there of $4,600 per resident. And if Moab were to reach this level, we'd have to increase our revenue by $10 million annually. So that's the disparity in the weighted average, just as a point of reference. The next metric, so I'm only going to go over 2 metrics tonight, not all 10, lucky for you. The second metric is Intergovernmental Dependence. And this is how much revenue is sourced from other governments as a percentage of your total governmental revenue. So the reason that you want to measure this is that it can be a warning sign because in difficult financial times, oftentimes other governments pull back that funding and keep it internally for their own purposes. And the second reason is similar, but a little bit different in that local governments are exposed by having a high percentage of your money coming from either state or federal level. Your funding is very dependent by people who don't have the same stake in our community. And so, again, these are just metrics. It doesn't mean, we're just trying to measure the strength of the community. It doesn't mean that if Moab scores low in all of them that we're financially in danger. It just means relative to those other communities. But here again, Moab did score lower, not the lowest in this case, where like Jackson, Wyoming actually is more heavily dependent by a large margin. As I glanced at that, it looked like they have a transit system that's very heavily dependent on federal funds, but still fell within their governmental revenue. Sedona, Arizona, interestingly enough, is also slightly higher than Moab. So we fell at 16% of our revenue. Total revenue is represented by intergovernmental revenue. So then also I included a weighted average for this metric as well, and that's 12.7%. So a lot of times we chase external funding because it's bringing funding into our community from outside. But in this case, this metric is basically trying to say that you're exposed by maximizing those revenue sources. And that is the end of my presentation. Thank you so much for the time. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask or schedule a time to visit with me. Always happy to talk municipal finance.
Questions? Kaylin?
Just refresh my memory. It's weighted by population. That's the weighted average.
And the first metric was weighted by population. The second metric was by total revenue.
Mm-hmm. And then did you try to look at an adjusted population with sort of an average daily visitor count?
I didn't. It's quite difficult to establish that, especially for 10 different resort communities. In this case, I just left it right there where it was, yeah.
Anybody else? Questions for Ben? Very interesting. Do you plan to come back to us again in the near future?
I will, yeah. So that was kind of like that was the teaser for the financial metrics. Next time I may come with a few more metrics, or I may just be done with the entire analysis, and then I'll really put you to sleep because it's 8 more metrics and talking about how that leads to different decision making.
And are these standardized metrics for municipal or local government?
They are. They are not standardized for resort communities. And so, that introduces a lot of new variables, like you pointed out. I mean, just that the population factor for visitation really changes the makeup of what services are being provided. So we may find that after we roll out like the initial 10 metrics, that we want to tweak it for our own needs and see how that changes over time. But it should provide a good baseline just to kind of say, okay, this is where we're at now, and provide guidance for the future, where we want to be in the future.
And is one of the metrics revenue stability or resiliency across different economic conditions?
Yeah, it is.
Great. I look forward to hearing about that one.
Awesome.
Yeah, interesting data. So we will be planning our strategic plan around budgeting soon, right?
That's right.
Sometime in December, is that what we're looking at?
Yeah.
So be prepared for that so that we can start planning for 23-24 budget.
Very good.
All right, Ben, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Next, we have presentations. We had asked the emergency manager from the county to come and make a presentation, Jenny Swinson, and she is not available. So we requested that somebody from either her or her office come and present to us October 11th. So hopefully we'll get somebody from the county's emergency management department to give us an update on where they're at, where they're going, and some of the issues that were raised by this council. But because we have no presentation from the emergency management office at the county, we do have a presentation from Chuck and Levi, Annie and Carly on what's going on with the emergency we just had.
Yeah, good evening.
Yeah.
I guess I'll start it out and have Levi and Annie and Carly kick in as we go and answer any questions you may have. Levi, this first slide is actually going to be you. Here's the, you got to talk into the microphone.
It looks like the dog park.
It's close to it.
So that first week, we removed roughly 2,300 tons of debris.
Wow.
Since then, we've reached close to 500. It's been 3 weeks, but additionally, we've added up 100 hours on the water truck and 100 hours on the sweeper. But there's also storm drain outlets in the creek that we're still trying to recover. So there's about a week's and a half's worth of work removing that stuff. So that's on debris.
What about the travel? Can you read it?
Oh yeah. The street sweeper's been busy doing the travel lanes. We're just now starting to get between the bike lane and the curb. Luckily, today's rainstorm has helped out quite a bit, removing some of that. But that's where the 500 tons of debris we've been removing has been from the travel lanes and what's left over in people's parking lots and yards.
Yeah, and one of the things as we've talked about it, just I'd add in there, is that cleaning up the flood deposition sediment is different than the normal dirt, from falling off people's Jeeps and all out of the sky, and it's much more difficult for the equipment that we have. So it takes several passes to get it done.
We're using brooms, and that just creates more dust. We wet it down, and it just smears it. So we're using the street sweeper to pick it up slowly, and it's going to take some time.
You already mentioned that.
No, we still have a lot of debris, fine debris in the bike lanes that we're working on right now.
Okay, some of the other cleanup efforts to date. Select critical debris has been removed. And what that means is large cottonwood trees that were upstream of our bridges, we've tried to clear them out. The crews have tried to clear them out so that if the next flood comes along, we don't have problems so close. Not done with that by any means, but it's been a focus as well when crews weren't cleaning up the streets. Channel was established at the pedestrian bridge below 100 West, thus allowing creek to return to the usual alignment. I think this is interesting for for folks, we've gotten lots of comments. So this picture is that bridge that's below the curve on 100 West Zach's parking lot. I guess you can't see my cursor, but, oh, you can, barely. You can see that this is the bridge that was completely covered from the top of the bridge to the channel, and then it forced the creek to be rerouted here to the northwest, I guess that would be, towards those homes off of West Center. We got a permit from the state to reestablish this channel, so our contractor went in, reestablished that channel, and now it's flowing into 100 West underneath the bridge, right? It's no longer being diverted to the northwest because we also sealed up that back to the original height. But as you can see by this photo, the approaches to that bridge are long gone, and the trail system that used to go there and the fence and all that stuff is long gone. And we haven't had time to do a structural evaluation of that bridge because it's just not the highest priority at this point. We've got other bridges that we're using that we want to make sure that they're safe, right? But this one's, it took a beating. Let's see if I can, oh, she froze up. Why would I do that? We'll go back this way. You know, I tried to get tricky by having that picture come insert there, but that may not have been the finest idea.
It'd be too big.
Yeah, I think you're right. Well, so the other things on that slide would have said that, and Annie can kick in here at any time, or certainly above, and by that I mean upstream of 300 South, the parkway is opened up for people to use it. But from 300 South down, we're keeping it closed until this storm system passes, because there's, you know, as everybody knows, there's a storm system tonight and tomorrow. Not making any predictions, but still, we think it's prudent. But there are also, it hasn't really been cleared of all hazards yet. I mean, there've been some tremendous cleanup work that Annie and her volunteers have done, but we've got to make sure that it's safe, because we lost handrail, the sidewalk was undermined. Part of that retaining wall, the framing that was on it has been bent. We just want to make sure that when we open it up, it's safe. So we'll evaluate it later this week, and if we can get those hazards cleared up, I think Annie's hoping to open it up to Main Street. Yeah, hoping to get there, but you know, you can't open them up if it's still hazardous. You know, we've got sidewalks undermined with drop-offs without handrails. Below 100 West, it's going to be months and months, because the bridge at 100 West, yeah, you can't see it, but that previous slide you could see, if you haven't been out there, that's where our temporary repair on the water line is, over the 100 West bridge, footbridge, and that was the only place to put it. But it's pushing the edge of the structural stability of that bridge. And we've had a structural engineer come out, so I can't in good conscience recommend we open that bridge. It's just potentially, if something were to happen while someone was walking on the bridge. So we just, as well as the fact that water line is, you know, it's not what you're expecting when you're walking down the trail in the night. It's black pipe. So that won't be open until we get the permanent repair done, which we have started. We've engaged a consultant engineer. They were out there doing surveying today. We've are hoping to get an emergency procurement action from Carly in summer, and then we'll have a contractor come in, and with any luck, our goal right now is to have that permanent repair done by January 1st. And that's going to be if everything goes well. I mean, that's blowing and going in the scheme of things. And that would be not only for 100 West, that line there, but also for the 400 East. I don't know if you've noticed on 400 East, we've got another temporary repair of a 12-inch water line on the sidewalk that goes across that bridge, that cantilevered sidewalk. So we've got that closed as well. There's just no room for people to walk. Again, the load rating is, we're pushing the limits of it, but it's better to have the water line on it than it is to have a water line and people on it. And I hope the people will respect that. We really have had trouble with literally every day. We have to go out and people cut the tape, they cut the orange fence that we use so one person can walk across because they don't like the inconvenience. And I don't know what to do about it. It's a law enforcement issue, and I know and Jared and I have talked about it, but there's limited capacity to do that. But if anything council could do to help staff, we'd sure appreciate it in getting the word out that, you know, we're trying to work as quick as we can, and we want to protect the public. You know, that's our goal. The last thing we want is someone to get hurt. And as you know, I tend to err on the side of conservatism when it comes to that. But I think that's the right side for us to err on as public servants. So, but that being said, you know, hopefully January 1st, we'll be able to open up that bridge, which would be a nice connector coming across. And the trail system, that's to be determined what happens there, because it was so blown out. I mean, it's almost non-existent in many places down through there. So, yeah, here we go. Here's an interesting one. Documented damages. What this spreadsheet is, and I'd like to take a few minutes on this, and Levi and Annie can kick in at any time too, is this is the format that FEMA wants, that the Utah Department of Emergency Management wants us to report to them on so that they can evaluate our damages to see if we qualify for assistance from FEMA. So this is just the cover page. There's like 15 spreadsheets hidden behind this that I could show you the spreadsheets if you want to dive into it, where we break it into by site, like the 300 South Bridge is a site, the 400 East Bridge is a site, et cetera. But on the top is the private property cumulative damages, and Barry did that, our building official essentially, and they don't ask for monetary damages on the private property, but they ask for like number destroyed, number of major damage, number of minor damage, numbers affected, and then I think that's the total is 18 and 23, call it 40, 39, I guess. Percentage that had homeowners insurance, looks like nobody. Percentage of flood insurance, looks like nobody, at least reported. We don't know that, you know. This is based on what people tell us. And then, were they rental properties? Looks like most of them were. And, but my understanding, and Carly, I know you attended that one meeting, you could clarify, but my understanding is there was originally hope that there's a threshold, I think it was 100 homes that we had to hit. If 100 structures would have been damaged, then they would have been eligible potentially for FEMA funding. But then there was, and when that didn't get there, the 39 structures, then we were thinking, well, maybe they would be eligible for Small Business Administration loans. But they came out and met, and my understanding is we didn't meet that threshold, Carly?
I haven't seen a final report, a final determination. We did meet like some initial thresholds when it came to monetary damage, but then there was also a number of businesses damaged as well that they're still determining if we're meeting that. I believe it was 50.
50, I think, yeah.
Yeah, and in that like major destroyed category. So we had a few, but not maybe enough. But we'll see how that goes. And so what we're working on now is just the public assistance, like our infrastructure.
Yeah, thanks. So then the part 2 here in the middle is public infrastructure cumulative damage totals. And so this, you know, I'll take a minute. It's the category of work, and these are FEMA's categories: debris removals, category A, emergency protective measures. And we had a meeting again today. We've been meeting quite often with everybody. We'll add $50,000 to $75,000 in there of that staff time that wasn't part of debris removal activities. They clarified that for us today. Connie, you were on that call, yeah. So, but in the scheme of things, it's not a lot of money, but it's money that was spent on this event. Roads and bridges damages. So Levi, correct me if I'm wrong, but this debris removal activity was based on your actual costs up till last week, and then you projected the rest, right?
Correct.
So $403,000 just for, and that's not in-channel work. That's within 100 feet of our bridges up and down, plus all the stuff that was in the streets. Roads and bridges damages. All of our vehicular bridges have been inspected twice by myself and by the state, and they're structurally sound and safe to drive on, but there's damage to the approaches, to the wing walls, and there are scour holes on the downstream side, and if you can really see it on any one of the bridges actually, and there was erosion and deposition in some of the bridges in the middle and then on the upstream side. Because a couple of bridges were overtopped. And we put those damages to make the repairs and bring them safety, about $2.1 million. And I'll come back to water facilities here in a moment, if I may. Utilities damages. There were the two 12-inch water lines below the 400 East Bridge and below the 100 West Bridge we were talking about a minute ago, where they were shallowly buried from, I don't know, the World War II era pipes maybe? Roughly. So they were 5 or 6 feet below ground. And in the scour event like the one we had, the scour holes can be between 10 and 15 feet. So, imagine not just the water that was down, but the rocks that are tumbling through those scour holes, they just they broke those pipes. So this $749,000 represents the money we've spent to date, because we had to engage contractors. We engaged Harrison and Jackson Excavating to help us with those repairs, because they have equipment that we don't have in-house and the expertise. And we know what the costs are because we're up and running right now. We have water, the temporary repairs are completed. Then we put together projected numbers to do the permanent repairs. There's engineering, survey, geotech, and then there's the construction, and that is $449,000 represents those 4 activities: 2 temporary repairs and 2 permanent repairs. And then recreation facility damage, about $1 million. We worked closely with Annie on that. Those were things like handrails on the parkway, sidewalks in the parkway, debris removal in the parkway, because Levi's debris removal is roads and bridges. In Annie's, we've got some parkway stuff, because that's what is significant in my mind as we look at the next slide in a moment. But there are on our roadway system, there are programs that address public infrastructure. They typically don't, they being the federal agencies that potentially can help us, count parks as public infrastructure. Like bathrooms they will, but not necessarily trails. Maybe that'll change someday, but it's something that, we've been doing the best we can, but it's about $1 million worth of cost there. And then if we go back up to category D, where it's water control facilities damages, that was our attempt, my attempt, at quantifying what it would cost to go from basically Powerhouse Dam, which is near the city limits, but it's the city limits near Powerhouse Dam, down to the river, and evaluate the 2 creek corridors. So Pack Creek is not Powerhouse, but it's over there by Murphy Lane. The 2 corridors, and bring them up to some level of a drainage system. And I'm not projecting what that is. These are river restoration numbers that we used. But those are a discussion that I suggest we should have and get some direction. So whether it ranges everything from, wow, that was a bad one, hope that doesn't happen for another 50 years, to let's go in and make channels. And I'm not suggesting either one. but there's something probably in between, which is, oh, this stretch we could make a nice riparian corridor, but it's large enough that we don't have houses in it, and we keep it thinned so that the trees don't fall down and go down river. And then there are parts around the bridges, like within 100 feet of each bridge, should be scour protected on both sides. That's just the truth of the matter. So what I did was I looked at, there was one interesting study that's out there. They did 45 rivers restoration projects around the country, large and small, really good study, and came up with a number average by linear foot. And I took it, put in inflationary factors, and came up with, multiplied it by those lengths that we have in the creeks, and came up with $13 million. It's a big number, but I don't think it's a big number. You know, if we that would kind of represent the maximum. Might be detention basins or debris basins, one or two along the way, that would collect the sediment and or woody debris that comes down that we would have to regularly maintain, but would be useful in events. So that's kind of, in my mind, an upper end number, but it's not extremely upper end. And we put it on there just to say there's a cost. If council wanted to pursue that, you know, there's the cost, a pretty good idea of the cost, short of going to design and all the environmental permitting that would have to go through. So those are the damages. Do you have any questions about those before I go to the next slide? Okay. Oh, don't tell me that locked up too. Oh, what the heck? Well, I probably have it memorized. It was, what recovery assistance have we explored or investigated? So this document here for documented damages, we prepared for FEMA assistance. And it's pretty comprehensive because it took us everything from the night of the flooding into the future to fix damages, right? So we're using this for all of the agencies who we have talked to. And some of them will pick and choose because there are various programs. So FEMA is one who we have talked to, multiple meetings, and they have this information. And what they require a 25% local match. So that's one of the things that there is no free money anymore.
Is that FEMA or NRCS?
FEMA.
FEMA
I asked
too?
them today because I thought it was 20%.
Yeah.
And she told me 25%, and I said, "Oh, I'm trying to keep up with the NRCS."
Yeah.
So it's been in contact with them, and it's to be determined. We have to meet a statewide threshold of about $6 million. They're not telling us what the exact number is, because Wayne County also had damages. The kicker on FEMA is, even if the state meets the threshold of the $6 million, and you know we're at $4 million of very documentable damages if they don't like the water control facilities, $13 million to. What they say though is, if our insurance, the city's insurance covers something, they're not going to cover it. And unfortunately, I was hoping, and I asked them the question, well, if the state makes $6 million and we've got $4 million and we've got $1 million of insurance, then we've still got a $3 million gap that we're not covered for. And they said, yeah, sorry. I think about, you ever buy a new car and they tried to hit you for gap insurance? No? Okay, it's the same thing as like, you bought your car for $20,000 a day, but when you wrecked it, the replacement's $30,000. So you pay insurance to cover that difference between there. There is no insurance, and they admitted that there's no, it would have to be creative. So under the FEMA program, if our insurance kicks in, and they're going to require that the insurance kick in if we're covered for these activities, we may not be eligible. Then the other program we've dealt with is where we've talked to and applied is the Nrcs, Natural Resource Conservation Service, who with their Emergency Watershed Protection Act, it's also 75-25, and they're the group who, remember in August of last year when we had the Pack Creek floods, they came out and approved us for $330,000 total for repair of the around there, and we've been working on those. And I called them up, and they were out, you know, the next day, and all the work we've done up till today on the engineering side, not all, but quite a bit of it, is gone, because now there's 2 to 4 feet of sediment in places that the survey doesn't cover. You can't go out to bid to a contractor with faulty information, plus there's increased damages. So what they said is, well, the best thing to do is they're gonna try and increase the money for the work order, it's not a work order, but the assignment for the stuff last year, and then we also can potentially get assistance this year for some of these programs. And one of the things that I was reading the Nrcs today that I like about it is their funding does cover easement acquisition and right-of-way acquisition. A lot of these other programs don't. And to be perfectly honest, except for the parkway, and that's only spotty in places, we don't have right-of-way in the creeks. You know, it's all through private land. And if we were to go in and do something, we'd want to have, in my opinion, because we're going to do maintenance of some sort, rights-of-way. So that means purchase of rights-of-way, probably.
So-
and that program, it provides that.
Just the consequence of that is that those individual property owners are sort of responsible for doing flood control on their property into the creek. And of course, they might not have like the equipment, the experience, the knowledge about how to properly maintain them. So we might be looking at like an easement that allows us to go in and do like flood control maintenance on their behalf. So right now it's extremely patchy, and some property owners might not even know that they're supposed to have that responsibility. So it's definitely worth looking at.
Yeah, so that's the Nrcs, and they're, again, 75-25 local match, 25% local match. We also had talked to the Federal Highway Administration, and they have an emergency relief program that remember we've talked about our functionally classified roads. They're the arterials and collectors that we have in our system that are identified as federal aid roads, so we're eligible for money on those. And the threshold was, interestingly, each site had to be at least $5,000 damage, which is pretty easy. But the total package had to be $750,000 damages. And based on our numbers right there, $2 million, and they came out and did a site visit last week, and we haven't gotten the letter yet, but I think they're gonna say, yes, we're eligible, and the thing about that is that's 7% local cost share, right? Because that's just FHWA. So in a way, that's a better deal for us. But I think I know they have the caveat in there about insurance. So we may go below the 770,000, so we might not be able to get that money. But we're actively pursuing it, I think. And then the final one is the insurance trust that the city belongs to. They came out on day 2 after the flood. Their lead adjuster from Salt Lake City, and we walked with him through, and he, in his mind, based on his knowledge, and we had discussions about what was covered and what wasn't covered, and he came out and said, you know what, this is significant enough. What I'm going to do is bump it up to my major claims adjuster, which is the underwriter. You know, so the trust has an underwriter, and he'll be out here next week. He and I, we've given him all this work and all the spreadsheets, and he's had a couple of, minor questions about that. But at this point, they're like, yeah, this is a good start for them to evaluate what's covered by insurance and what's not. And I had the discussion with him, and, this is about the water lines and about there's some handrail, for instance, on 300 South Bridge. We got to get fixed because there's a 10-foot drop. And I said, hey, I'd really like to know if, it's covered. And he said, well, and he was correct on this. He goes, well, you're going to have to do it anyway, aren't you? Well, I said, well, yeah, but it's a question of whether or not it's covered. So after talking with Carly, we're proceeding full speed ahead to repair the guardrail, because that'll be less than the $750,000 or the $500,000 to do the permanent water lines. And by the time it comes to actually go to construction on those, we should know from the insurance if that's covered or not, right? Or, so we're not really out there hanging. But And of course, the thing about that is there's no local match. There is a deductible, but the premiums will probably go up, right? So again, it's no free money. And, but that's the synopsis of what we've been doing is, it's FEMA, NRCS, federal highways, and the insurance trust. And it kind of all keeps pointing back to insurance. All of them want to see our insurance policy. Anything you want to add, or Annie, anything you want to add? So that's kind of what I thought we would have. I know that's I just couldn't get to my last slide, which was that what I just told you about. Are there any questions about it? I know it's a lot, but we've been pushing it to, Levi's crews and Annie's crews have been pushing it to get things back operational. And what we've been doing is trying to push it to get some money to do the fixes.
And I do want to, we're talking about kind of two kinds of money that we're going for, or will be going for. One is recovery money. So that's sort of what Chuck is talking about. How do we pay for the cleanup? How do we get it back to its standard condition? But we also want to be having that discussion about, okay, recovery is one thing. How do we pay for mitigation? And what does mitigation look like? And so those are different kinds of funds, like FEMA, and DHS have the brick funding, the flood mitigation funding that I think we've talked about a little bit with all of you. One other funding source that we're kind of talking about pursuing is a legislative appropriation. I know a lot of the state representatives have been very supportive if we want to approach the legislature about maybe getting that recovery gap funded by the legislature. We've also been talking to Grand County about that option for residences and businesses who have also not been covered. So more to come.
Kaylin?
I have a question. Oh, go ahead, Caitlin.
So for the active transportation path west of 100 West,
West of 100 West.
Yep.
Yes.
Between there and 500 West.
Yeah.
So I realize there was some investment in it previously, but not to the level of some of the other paths. Would it be possible sooner than later to just say, here's a new route that works with the new topography, and blade it and possibly put down road base and reestablish it?
Sure, that's a possibility. The question is, I would guess is, where does that sit on the priority list for resources, both human power and money? But yeah, I just put it off until we could get the structures taken care of. That's where I tend to go. And Annie's, the urban trails. I think it's almost non-urban, but yeah, those were, like you say, road-based. You recall that's what those were between 100 West and 500 West, and we're going to have to go back to the design plans we had from the last project in 17 and figure out where the trail was, unless we want to realign it. And when I said we opened up the creek, we haven't opened up the creek the whole way, and I don't know that we want to, but I don't know that we don't want to. And we'll have to get 404 permits to do it, is my guess, which is all doable. It's just that it honestly won't happen really soon. Even if council said, Chuck, it's #1 priority, here's the money, go get it done, it'll be months because we have to go through the 404 process to do that, for that that realignment in there and fill in their waters of the U.S. But it's doable.
Tommy?
Yeah. Where is all this material going?
Good question. So we have some land up there by the water tank up on Powerhouse Lane. We're throwing some material up there. There's some in town. One of the Taylors, is it the Taylors? The bottom of West Center, they were hit pretty hard and lost a lot of debris out of their yard. So we've hauled everything in that area. We've hauled to their residents to help. There's been a few that have taken some, but the majority, we've taken some to the shop. The majority of it has gone to up there above Powerhouse Lane.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then is this flood going to impact the the Mill Creek Shared Pathway, that was approved with the hotspot funding? Is it just going to delay it, or
I think so.
just
In
the shared
county?
pathway out Spanish
Oh.
Valley Drive? I'm sorry.
Oh, the counties.
sorry.
The counties? It might. I haven't looked closely at that because it's in the county. But it might, if it changed the topography, they might have to go do some cleanup and some survey. Levi drives it more often than I do, but,
Yeah, the shoulder on Spanish Valley has been washed out pretty
Bad,
good too.
yeah.
well,
Okay, I was just curious. Thank you.
Jason?
So, you guys, I mean, this is a question for everybody. I've talked to a couple property owners who live near the creek, and they said that, you know, they're like, what am I doing with all this wood debris that's in my yard and stuff like that? And I'm like, well, load it up, take it to the dump, you know, take it to landfill. And they said the landfill is now charging them for that. It was my understanding that that was waived, but they said, no, that was only for like 2 days or something like
Okay.
that.
I think that's true.
So a lot of these people, you know, are that, especially like, you know, from, well, that have property that have tons of wood and garbage, are like, what am I doing with this? You know, is this now, I can't make a burn pile, I can't burn it, I can't, it's gonna cost me hundreds of dollars to haul it, you know, I'm like, I was like, yeah, that's a good point. I go, I don't know why we're not allowing people to dump it, you know, up there. And so,
We can contact the Solid Waste District and ask them if they can waive the fee. Another option, and Kaylin can probably speak to it too, they should know that I think Team Rubicon is going to be here in the next few weeks too, who can help with the debris removal, and Cara is someone they can get into touch with. So maybe they don't have to do it themselves. And I think Team Rubicon carries it away.
See, I don't know where they're gonna carry it away.
Right.
yeah.
Yeah, I don't either. Well,
So, I mean,
Team
no,
Rubicon.
if they, no, that's gonna be a condition of their floodplain use permit, is they
Yeah.
have to tell us where they're gonna carry it away.
Yeah.
Because just taking it out and throwing it.
Yeah.
But even if
sometimes-
it's Team Rubicon, they're not gonna wanna incur the expense of dumping
Right.
it,
Dumping it.
you know?
That'd be my
And
guess,
so,
yeah.
and that's what, yeah, I was kinda curious on that. And then I was also wondering, who owns the creek bed? Is that Moab City, is it sovereign lands? Is it,
You mean if we don't have easements or right of way on it?
yeah, right,
No, it's
like high water mark to low water mark, who owns that?
so the ordinary high water mark, which is typically the 10-year floodplain, is considered to be waters of the United States. So the federal government claims sovereignty over that land, which is when I spoke earlier about a Army Corps of Engineers 404 permit. To work in there, you need a 404 permit. And sometimes the stream, you can get a stream alteration permit that will allow you to do certain limited activities, but that doesn't preclude you, that's not a get out of jail free card for the 404 permit. If you're in the 100-year floodplain, there are rules that FEMA has that the city regulates because we're part of the National Flood Insurance Program, in which says that we're gonna comply with FEMA's rules. So, but we don't own that land, but we can regulate it. And if I may, Jason, I've meant to mention this earlier, you know, the reason to belong to the NFIP, the National Flood Insurance Program, is because if you don't belong to it, FEMA may not ever respond in a disaster. They've made that very clearly, that if you don't belong and you get flooded out, and there's a history of communities that ignored the flood insurance program, had floods, and FEMA said, sorry. Now, they may still say sorry to us, even though we're in it because of the threshold that I talked about earlier, but if our threshold, if your damages are even more. But the other thing is, people who live in the floodplain and get and comply with the rules and get flood insurance, it's subsidized by the federal government. So those are just two of the advantages of us being in the managing our floodplains the way we do through our flood control ordinance. Because some people have asked, well, why do we even do that?
Right.
And I think, I just wanted to make sure the council knew that those are the reasons, because we haven't talked about that before. But I'm sorry if you have
No, that was
questions.
it. I was just kinda curious.
So just to clarify, it's not about, so they have jurisdiction because of like this Clean Water Act. I do think that it is not a sovereign creek bed. I asked the state engineer about that. I don't think Mill Creek is sovereign.
Well, the only reason I was wondering
And
is,
so it's like, it's the folks who are, it depends on what the property lines look like, but they can own and
They
do
have
according.
regulatory authorities.
Yeah, for sure. They have total like regulatory authority and like jurisdiction about how it has to be treated and stuff like that. So like they have to get a permit anytime the state engineer. The water belongs to the state or to like water rights holders, you know, really to the state, and then we use it. But the beds for I think Mill Creek are not sovereign. They're not like the Great Salt Lake beds or Utah Lake or those kinds of things. There are very few sovereign waterways in Utah. Colorado River. Yes, yeah.
Ronnie?
Oh, yeah, no, especially after we had the Cinema Court fire, it was interesting to look at some of the lot lines on lots like above the bridge, above Cinema Court, because I think when you look at those lot lines, people's property, I mean, it comes right over, right, and in some cases crosses the creek, right? So, yeah, that's probably just good for people to know. Like, I know that surprised me when I saw it, but just one or two questions that Chuck and Levi kind of answered for me, but I thought it was interesting if somebody was listening, maybe it's just good for them to hear. I had a question for someone about if anybody had, you know, flown drone footage over the flood area and if that was available to the public, but it sounds like either like the files we have are too large and not shareable, and I don't think we have access to kind of what the sheriff's department showed us. So as far as I know, there's no footage available for people to access and watch, right? I just wanted to check that in case that.
So we've flown,
Yeah.
what we have flown are the areas where it jumped the creek banks,
Yeah.
just because that was our priority. We haven't had time to fly the whole thing.
Yeah.
And there really are large files, and
Yeah.
will we be able to, at some point, find a way to make them smaller and make it available? Yeah, we can, or we'll digitize it and say, here's where it jumped, and, you know, just put lines in the map as
And that might
opposed to, here's the photo of it.
Just been someone who was curious and wondering if it was easy, so I just
But
thought,
no,
okay, we can
we-
establish for them it's not, easy.
Yeah, we're on it, and we want to document it,
Yeah.
Yep, definitely.
where it is.
Okay, and then I think another person asked, and I didn't know if other people were wondering this, but, it seems like you guys might need some more heavy equipment. I can't remember what was the terminology somebody used. A log garbing attachment for a loader. And I know obviously there's certain things you can do in a creek and can't because of these 404 permits. So I was just going to kind of reiterate for that person or other people in the community who might have similar thoughts that you guys are working under certain constraints of what you can and can't do, and while we appreciate the suggestion, I think you guys are only going to use equipment that you're allowed to use, and if you need something like that, you'll probably either come to us and tell us you need it, or you'll find someone to borrow it from or rent it from, right?
Yeah, we're
Yeah.
extremely undermanned as far as equipment goes. I mean, we have 2 loaders, 2 backhoes, 2 Mini-X, 2 Bobcats, and they're all in full swing. And we have more hands than we do equipment.
Yeah.
We could definitely use more. I mean, how often are we going to be in this scenario? Hopefully not very. But when you need it, it comes in handy.
Yeah.
And
Well,
it-
not to mention, if we had that money and we could say, go buy that, you probably couldn't get it until a year and a half from now.
We'd be renting it, yeah.
We'd build one
exactly
in
right.
Lego, yeah.
Yeah.
And then the other thing was just to thank you, because I know, a lot of people had the water pressure issues right around the flood, and most of that was rectified in, 24 hours or less. But I know I and some other people had noticed just lower water pressure. It was weird at my house because it was in the irrigation, but not at the house. And I just happened to ask Levi, and he helped me understand what had been going on. And I didn't know, Levi, since some other people might have been impacted, and it sounds like it's fixed now, but maybe it just helps to have the short explanation for some people of why there was maybe a lingering thing, and it sounds like it's fixed now.
So both damaged areas were transmission lines, and they was fed from a high pressure zone. And we had to isolate both sides of the creek, which eliminated that high pressure. So we had to reroute the water feed from a lower pressure zone, which created those lower pressures.
Yeah, okay, thanks. I thought that just helps people understand if they had noticed something more recently, but
Yeah, both-
thank you again for addressing that and helping me
Both water
understand why it
mains are
happened.
in service now, so
Yeah,
pressure's restored.
I think that was it for me.
Thanks, Ronnie. Kalen?
Oh, I was just going to say that I will find out about the flood debris waiver program and if it could be extended
With the solid waste
with the
district?
solid waste district.
All right, great, thanks, Kalen. Luke, do you have any questions? All right, well, I have been in contact with all of our state representatives, and they're very willing to help. They have expressed to me that there is funding available at the state level. It's not through any kind of agency or program. And so when we get to the point where we know what is covered and what is not, we'll probably need the council and myself to work closely with our state to see, and with Casey, our lobbyist, to see if we can try to get an appropriation specific to Moab to help cover those costs that are not going to be covered. So we'll see where that goes. I just want the public to know that our state representatives are very much concerned about what's happening here and are available to help us, provided that what the federal government is not going to cover, that the state has said that they'd be willing. And we'll see what that amount is, but I think we need to keep that in mind and work closely with them as well.
Do we
Ronnie?
have some idea of timeline of how long it'll take to figure out, what these other entities are willing to cover, just so we would know, like at what point we might be going to the legislators? Yeah.
Yeah, I think it really hinges, in my opinion, on the insurance company.
Right.
As soon as we get an evaluation from the insurance company who says what's covered, and they agree upon, or we agree upon the cost that they'll reimburse us for, then we'll know what we qualify for from the other agencies. And, yeah, so Ronnie, that could be a month,
Okay.
would be I'd be surprised if it's a lot longer than a month, but I'd be surprised if it's any sooner than a month. Just because they're gonna have the site visit next week, they're gonna go back and do their
Right.
thing, then they're gonna submit some to us, and we're gonna comment on it, and then back and forth, and then reach an agreement, and they'll tell us what they'll cover.
Yeah, and this may be an out of our area question, but it's just one I got from some residents who were like, well, no, I didn't have flood insurance and I flooded, but that's because I was always told I wasn't in an area where I'd need flood insurance. And so for people who have questions like that, do we know over time if that gets reassessed at some point, or, I was thinking, and we should all know that there were people who probably would have gotten flood insurance if they were told that they needed it or qualified, but they weren't in an area, I guess, that, technically according to the maps, FEMA would have said.
So the reason that
Yeah.
people not in the floodplain
Yeah.
got flooded was because the 300 South Bridge
Yeah.
clogged with debris, forced water down 300 South. Main Street, I believe, overtopped as well, I was told.
Yeah.
I did not see that myself. Then the water hit Main Street, turned northbound, then went to Center, went west, went around 100 South by the Zack's parking lot, and I did see it flowing uphill on 100 West to Williams Way as well as down West Center. So those, for the most part, those folks are not in
Yeah.
the mapped 100-year floodplain, because the mapped 100-year floodplain doesn't anticipate bridge clogging and then route it around. Now, we could go through that exercise and say, what if this bridge gets clogged? Where does the water go? And then we could adopt non-FEMA floodplain maps that were city floodplain maps. And in my experience in Arizona, what they would do is you could qualify for flood insurance. They called them locally adopted floodplains.
Oh, okay.
Whether or not you want to do that, I don't know. But it's an option, and then that would allow, and I'm not the insurance expert, but I believe that a lot of insurance companies will give you flood insurance even if you're not in a
That's
FEMA
right, that's
floodplain.
true.
Mine will.
Yeah, I got flood insurance after August 11th, and it was through FEMA. It wasn't through State Farm.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think some of us just have, sympathy and understand why some people wouldn't have thought they needed it, so.
Well,
Yeah.
when they
Yeah.
redid the FEMA map, my recollection is when the city redid the FEMA map, they did that on purpose so that people didn't have to get flood insurance. Because it was required, at one point, it was required for me to get flood insurance at my place until the city redid the FEMA map, or FEMA redid the FEMA map, whoever did it, and then I no longer needed to get it. So we didn't.
Yeah,
And then I changed my mind.
I mean, we might want to evaluate, I think it sounds like a good idea, like,
Yeah, I
let's
do
do our
too.
locally approved flood, or our own kind of floodplain maps, but that might have implications for someone being required to have
Right.
insurance all of a sudden, and so something to, I don't know what that does for their, their mortgage, I don't know what that means for what they can do, so just something to balance.
And if I, just to,
Yeah.
along those lines, you know, we kind of walked to the brink, I've said this before, that flood, we walked to the edge of the world, looked over, and we came back, because no one died, right? We didn't lose any bridges, but it was some pretty serious damages throughout, and if things were close, people almost died, we know that, just from reading the newspaper. But people who have complied with the floodplain regulations that we have, that have been built since the city became in the flood program, which was 2009 is when the maps were adopted, they were relatively unharmed, right? I mean, there are places where I've been shown by homeowners, look at the debris line, it's right there at the edge of my house. How did you know? And it's like, of course, I didn't know, but, you know, but they elevated and they were set back. So the people who built before those regulations were in effect and didn't know and are down in the low-lying areas, they're the ones, and I was talking to Barry this afternoon about damages, because Barry was really, there were like 4 or 5 houses where everything was gone, everything was lost, and I said, what were they? And they were basements.
Right.
They were basements where they were flooded and lost all their personal belongings, because 12 feet of water or 10 feet of water in the basement. So that happens a lot in floods, where basements are just not a good idea, to be honest with you.
And this is an item that can wait either for dispersed parking or you can answer it now. But only with the question of thinking through stormwater, and I know we have probably future meetings that are coming to think about some of the various plans that, or just other things we should all have in place to be prepared. Because I think we all expect more of this with climate change, but is there an easy answer to help the layperson understand when we do things like bump outs in streets? Does it have any impact on stormwater flow, or it's usually short, low enough because it's curb height, and also some of what we're talking about with the dispersed parking will be swales and other things, that it's a non-issue? That was just kind of only another question that arose.
It's not a non-issue, but we take it into consideration during design.
Okay,
So a lot of the bump outs will have a channel either through them to help, and then a small detention basin to help infiltration as well as mitigate stormwater in the smaller storms. In the larger storms, they get drowned out, to be perfectly honest with you. You don't design those chicanes and those bump outs to handle the 100-year flood. There's just not enough real estate to do that. So if we'd have had bump outs on 300 South, there was 3 to 4 feet of water that came out of there. They'd have been overtopped and it wouldn't have mattered at all. But we do take into account design for the minor, smaller events, as well as try and look at the larger events during that process.
okay, thanks.
Anything else for Chuck, Levi, Annie, Carly?
Just a big thank you.
Yeah.
You guys have been busting it out. A lot of work.
Yep.
A month into it, we're not even close.
Right.
A long ways to go.
A lot more work to do. And for the public, I know everybody's anxious. I know everybody wants things to be back to normal. They're not. And as Kaylin mentioned, the area from 500 West down to up to 100 West, it's devastated there. I mean, it looks horrible. And I think that the public safety is still a really important issue, and that's why we would prefer that people stay out of those areas until we can get in there and clean them up a little bit. But please be patient, and please listen to what we're saying. Please be patient and follow the rules. When areas are closed, they're closed. So
They're close to protect you, not to keep you out.
exactly. We'll get back there. It's just going to be time. We've got a lot of other places that we can ride our bikes and walk besides downtown. We miss the parkway, though. It's a very great asset to us. So thank you guys very much, and we'll hear from you again, I'm sure, when you get more information about what the costs are, what we need to come up with.
We'll be back anytime you want.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
All righty, moving on to our consent agenda. We have 4 items on the consent agenda. First is the adoption of a hazardous mitigation plan. This is a plan that was developed by the county with input from the city. We partnered with the county on this plan in 2018, but the city did not adopt the plan, and so we need to do that now in order for us to be eligible for the BRIC funding that you heard about. It's the Building Resilient Infrastructure and Community Funding through FEMA. Also, just so you know that this plan will be, the county has budgeted money to update this plan next year, but in order for us to qualify for this money next year, we need to adopt the plan tonight. So that's why this is on the consent agenda. Did I explain that correctly?
Exactly correctly, and it's that BRIC funding, and it's any FEMA hazard mitigation funding in those kinds of programs. So for us to be eligible for those big pots, it has to be in place for a year prior to the disaster, which is why we don't want to just wait till next year till they adopt their new one, because something happens next September, we will still be not as eligible.
And we'll be involved in that process. So it's not like the county's going to do it and we just adopt it. We'll be involved in the process throughout. The other two items are our approval of the minutes from August 23 and the payment of the bills of $810,985.35. And then lastly, this is just basically approval of the financial report through June 30th. And any questions on that? Ronnie?
Yeah, I have a bunch of questions. I appreciate that we're getting to adopt the it's actually pre-disaster hazard mitigation plan. That said, there is so much information in here, including about, the role the city is supposed to play in, what's the word I'm trying to think of? Not integrating, but anyway, carrying through the plan, that I'm happy to vote on it in a consent agenda tonight, but I would like to request a workshop soon for the council so that we can ask some questions about this plan, but then also have kind of a comprehensive discussion about emergency, our role in emergency planning as a city, but then also what plans and documents we should have in place and what we have now and what we need to have, so we can get more of a comprehensive overlook of what we have and what we're missing and what needs to be prioritized on what kind of timeline. So I did have a request for a workshop like that because, and I would recommend to anyone who's remotely interested in this that they do read the plan. I'm still reading through parts of it, but there's a lot of good information in it. And I did let the council know, but there's just a placeholder in this plan for the community wildfire preparedness plan, but that plan is actually available online. So I sent the link to colleagues, and it's too long to read here, but I think we can make sure that people can access that, but people should know that that plan was written and it was updated by Moab Valley Fire in 2020. And there's a lot of good information in there. I was wondering, too, if we do have a workshop or just now briefly about BRIC, if anybody can just kind of briefly, so now or in the future, help us understand the parameters of BRIC and what it can and can't help us with. Like, I understand partnership is a big part of it. And I know we have partnerships at the city level, like, say, the one we have with fire, forestry, and state lands, and rim-to-rim restoration, and the fire department all kind of collectively in terms of fire mitigation and some other planning. And I'm assuming the hours that they bring in, like with Team Rubicon too, that's all the kind of partnership things that BRIC would allow for. But I'm curious what other partnerships we should think about or models. And then also in terms of voting on the consent agenda, I kind of need to split it out because I don't know how many people read the minutes, but there's still some editing that needs to happen on the minutes. I think it didn't adequately capture our vote about the MRAC fees. It didn't encapsulate the 10% for locals and 20%, those percentages, for non-locals. And so I'd like to get that fixed. So I'm wondering if we can table the minutes. So those were just my requests to colleagues. And we can discuss. I could make a motion to split that out and table the minutes, but.
Anything else, Ronnie?
No.
Anybody else? Motion?
Okay, well, I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda, but the three items, approving the bills and the financial report and adopting the pre-disaster hazard mitigation plan, but I would like to table the minutes of August 23rd until our next meeting, just so we can get those edits right. It was just kind of a time-consuming thing to listen back and make a suggested, yeah.
Motion made by Ronnie to approve the consent agenda 5.1, 5.3, 5.4, and table the approval of the minutes till our next meeting. Second?
Second.
Seconded by Kalen. Any discussion, Ronnie?
No.
Kalen?
The disaster
Hazardous mitigation.
Hazard mitigation plan was interesting, and I'm glad to hear that they're planning to redo it, so happy to approve it for the sake of funding, and then look forward to continued hazard mitigation planning here.
Right, good. Anybody else? We'll call for the vote. All in favor of approving 5.1, 5.3, 5.4 on the consent agenda with tabling 5.2 until our next meeting? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0. Thank you. All right, I have a proclamation here. And it's a proclamation by myself and the City Council of the City of Moab proclaiming September 2022 to be Suicide Prevention and Awareness Month. Whereas the state of Utah has consistently been on top of 10 states for suicide deaths since 2012, currently 9th in the nation. And whereas Carbon, Emery, and Grand counties often lead the state of Utah in suicide deaths per capita, and whereas people who lose a loved one onto suicide are at 30% higher risk of ending their lives to suicide as a learned coping mechanism and learned behaviors, and whereas the risk of suicide can be reduced through awareness training, proper educational resources, and treatment, and whereas according to the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention statistics, suicide is the #1 leading cause of deaths among Utahns aged 10 to 24, second leading cause of death amongst age 25 to 34, third leading cause of deaths for ages 34 to 44, fourth for ages 45 to 55, eighth for ages 55 to 64, and 18th for ages 65 and older. And whereas suicide affects each and every one of us, suicide is everyone's business. Suicide is one of the most preventable deaths that can be avoided by learning the warning signs of depression and suicidal ideation, knowing how and when to ask about one's suicidal thoughts, being aware of life-saving measures, and familiarizing ourselves with the resources available locally as well as statewide, such as the newly launched 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. Now, therefore, I, Joette Langanese, Moab City Mayor, on this 23rd day of August 2022, do hereby proclaim September 2022 to be Suicide Prevention and Awareness Month in Moab City, and encourage all residents of Moab City to recognize how serious suicide is and the steps each of us can take to protect those around us from this preventable tragedy, one with devastation, generations, and community-wide effects. I encourage anybody that has some issues and need to talk to somebody, please reach out to Four Corners or any other agency here that helps us deal with these kind of issues. Any thoughts or comments? Okay.
Just don't do it.
Right.
It is a really permanent solution to a very temporary problem.
Yeah. Thanks, Tawny. All right, next, moving on. Old business. As you all recall, at our last meeting, we approved the amendment of the master fee schedule, and one of the requests that was made was for means testing, so that we could allow those folks that can't afford to use the swimming pool to have a way to do so. And Annie's here to present this ordinance to us, and Thank you for getting this to us so quickly. Really appreciate that.
Easy to compile. So our goal was to make this as inclusive as possible, and to a certain extent, we don't necessarily want to dive into the finances of some of our residents. So we're proposing to be eligible, you need to show residency. So either you're enrolled in the school district here, you can show us that you live within the county, or that you're employed within the county. And also, if you're eligible for any existing state or federal aid program, then you can show us documentation of that, and you'll be eligible for this program as well. And so we listed in the report some of the most common ones that people are familiar with. If they cannot provide that, then we can look at your income levels, and we are mirroring the income levels that are required to get into the reduced fee lunch program.
Questions?
The only question I have about that is I did notice that earlier in the year, the school was encouraging every child to apply for reduced and free lunch. Is that going to play into anything? I don't know if that meant that they would be awarded that or not.
Well, if they have meet those income requirements, then they would probably be in need of that. I'm not exactly sure.
But I just didn't know if they were encouraging every child to apply, and is every child approved, is that?
I don't think so.
It's a
You don't think so?
It's
Okay.
income-based is how you
Okay.
qualify.
I think up until like a couple weeks ago, or the school year, everybody had free lunch. Or free,
It's like COVID relief, right?
yeah.
Something like that.
So,
Good to know.
my question is like, what is the financial burden of administering this to your department?
I think if someone's showing existing aid program, then that can be handled by the front desk manager at the MRAC. If they want to show sensitive information like income, then we would send that to the finance program, and we've chatted with them. I'm not exactly sure how many people will apply for this, so I can't really estimate that.
And there was never anything like this before. This is the
Not
first time.
formalized.
Okay. And what were we talking about? Remind me. We were going to take revenues from the non-local pot and fund this with that? Is that?
I think ideally, like, try to offset the lost revenues from it. So we don't know if there'll be enough to like cover the offset. I think a part of it is dependent on how many people actually participate in this program, and then how these increase in rates affect like future sales moving forward. But
Yeah, okay.
Right.
It might just be easier to understand, like the subsidy might be, from the general fund, might be a little greater with this in place, but since we don't know how many people will be interested, we're not sure what that loss in the subsidy will be. Yes, Emma?
Any other questions?
I just wanted to thank Annie. I had a bunch of questions on the shared document, so thanks.
Yeah, sure.
That's helpful.
Great. Do I have a motion to approve proposed ordinance 2022-15, an ordinance amending Moab Municipal Code Chapter 3.50 Master Fee Schedule for the Recreation Aquatic Center to include a reduced fee program?
I can move to approve proposed ordinance 2022-15, an ordinance amending Moab Municipal Code, Chapter 30.50, Master Fee Schedule for the Recreation and Aquatic Center to include a reduced fee program.
Motion made by Tawny. Second?
I'll second.
Second by Luke. Tawny, any discussion?
Nope.
Luke? Anybody else? All right, I'll call for the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously, 5-0. Thank you, Annie.
Thank you.
All right, next, old business 7.2, downtown dispersed parking, 30% plan and program review. This is Chuck. Where did Chuck go?
Chuck disappeared.
Chuck disappeared. There's Chuck. Okay, so what this tonight is kind of like, let's give Chuck any input that we have on the dispersed parking project. Public has met many times, council has heard about this many times. So if you have any minor changes, this would be the time to do it, and then we can move to the construction phase of the dispersed parking. If you have any major changes, we'll probably have to go back and relook at it. So now's your time. Now's the time. Yes?
Make a request that
Yeah.
everybody please speak in your microphone. I'm having a hard time hearing you, so I know that it's annoying me in your face, but
Can they hear me?
you sounded good. They could not hear anything at all, so
Okay.
we're just running into some problems, so just speak in your microphone. If it blasts this in here, then that's the sound.
Okay. Thanks, Summer. All right, Chuck.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. So we're at 30% plans, and we have made multiple modifications to the original scenario, and that was based upon input from council, input from residents, input from businesses. And like, you know, the old saying, you can please all the people some of the time and some of the people all the time, but you can't please all the people all the time. We tried, but we think that we've come pretty close to agreeance on the streets. And with the landscaping plans in here as well. So we gave you those 30% plans. And right now, I guess I just quickly as a way of introduction say that the streets that we've included are, I don't like this new laptop as much as my old laptop. Shown on this street where it's 200 north on the west, and then Center Street, and then 100 east. We took out 200 south to the east side, but we maintained 200 south on the west side. And we are still at like 185 stalls, parking stalls, and our goal was 188. And UDOT will be fine with 185. We've talked to them about it. And they would consider that us meeting our obligation under the terms of the contract with UDOT for the funding. I've included budgets with this. One of the things that, in anticipation of some questions, our landscape architect was kind enough to send me what she called talking points, but rather than me trying to just, I was going to have you show them. This might be helpful for council. The plan includes footings for future sculptures, but sculptures are not included in the project.
Right.
Included in the plans are custom artistic furnishings that were strongly supported in the public process. We've got some tailgate benches. Remember, she showed us some pictures of those that could be made. There are Corten bollard lights, which are the non-shiny steel, right? Corten is the more, I don't know, I want to call it rusty looking, but it's
Weathering.
weathering, thank you. Yeah, that's what it is. And decorative cast iron grates are covered. Plantings, there is an emphasis on shade trees. We chose the hardy, durable, low water and adapted. However, all planting needs some irrigation to survive, at least in the first 2 to 5 years. So we've included the locations are partially based on where we could get water to them relatively easily. Ground cover and shrubs are a combination of native and adapted xeric low water. Shade sails, there are shade sails in here. And they're the ones we spec'd and costed out are the high durability industrial strength materials. Again, I know council's preference for shade trees, and we tried to get in as many as we could, but the shade sails still had support from the public because we can take them down in the winter, right? We keep them, put them up in the summer, take them down in the winter so they're not exposed to the elements, and then put them back up again next summer, and it achieves the goal of at least cooling, providing some cooler refuge. We got one drinking fountain in there, and that's because I thought we should have one. They're expensive, more expensive than you'd think, to put the nice ones in that have the bottle filler and a dog dish station, and it's ADA accessible. But we've got one of those in there. I forget the exact location. The boulders, we'll use Utah landscaping rocks. On the budget, the bollards, the grates, the benches, the bike racks, the stone accent pavement, and the crusher fines are all covered within the UDOT budget. Remember, UDOT allows 6% for aesthetics, but the planting, the shade sails, the irrigation, the boulders, the water stations, and the sculpture bases are included in money that the council, I believe, approved a certain amount in this year's budget. Those would be covered by additional local city funds. But it still comes within budget between we believe, based on our best estimates, that we are within budget if we proceed forward with this as outlined. So with that, someone told me I went pretty long the last item, so if I won't try and go through every detail, but if you've had an opportunity to look and have questions, I'll try and answer them. If I can't answer everyone tonight, I'll get you an answer.
Questions?
I guess I have a bunch, some are from ones people sent me, and then, so obviously we can read these 100 pages and, the comments that came in from the public, and so some of these are just ones that came up before, and if you like, kind of the, so I got some questions from people about oversized vehicles and, the buses that routinely stop in front of the MIC parking lot, and how if you did center median, how is one going to deal with that conflict? So I know we've been saying, the purpose of this whole exercise hasn't been to address the oversized vehicles, and it does seem like a lot of the median parking went away, so I'm sure some of those will still just end up using, other parking spaces, and there are a few longer spaces by Walker now, but just to put out there that I guess, there's still discussion in the community about what is our plan for dealing with oversized parking, but then specifically, do we have a concern about these buses that apparently have been parking near the MIC with the median parking? I can put it into the specific wording someone put, but I think that generally says. So I just didn't know, did anyone else raise that, or?
We didn't hear it very often.
Yeah.
To be honest with you, and at some point this has changed, and we've,
Yeah.
and I don't say that flippantly. I'm just saying that, hopefully they can be accommodated by going to a block over, if need be. And it seems like walking a block might be appropriate.
Yeah.
I don't know.
And granted, I'm reading the version of the packet that's, 504 pages long, so it's not the broken out links, but, so, and I know we've changed things over time, so I was, I would look at one map and I would scroll through the packet and I'd look at another map, and I know we made changes as we got input from people, and so I was thinking we might be looking at 195 parking slots, so I know you said 185, do you know, is one of these maps in here, kind of show that layout with the 185?
No, the reason I said
Yeah.
185 is
Yeah.
when we get into final design,
Yeah.
still some things are going to change.
Okay.
I mean, this is our best estimate at 30%. So I presented that 185 is rock solid. That means we're probably going to lose a few because we'll find something out that we don't know already as we go into that next level. But I'm pretty confident that if we don't make major changes, we'll get that 185.
I know when I looked at the little drawing schematics in the landscaping, there were a few little details that were just hard for me to see, and I might not have zoomed in enough, but just generally, I know some of the bollards have lights on them, and some of them are just bollards. Is there a way to kind of, for you to generalize for me, just so I understand where the lighted ones are going to be?
The lighted ones
Yeah.
would be like, let me show you if I can pull it up.
Thanks. Yeah, on the key, it was like a little bullet and a slightly bolder bullet, but I had trouble seeing the difference.
So and you don't have this one, I got this one this afternoon. This is how a landscaping treatment might look on the median parking. And if
Gotcha.
you see there, bollard light right there. So where we have a path for pedestrians to go, where we've got the bollards, we'd put lights on those.
Gotcha. Okay, so but the ones, just if I have a bunch of angled parking or, median parking that's angled, those bollards probably don't have lights or
Right,
nothing.
because we have overhead, the 12-foot tall lights.
Or 20,
Insufficient
Okay.
spacing to take care of those lightings.
Okay, and then looking at the landscaping too, I mean, looking at the key, did we end up with like one pergola? I saw pergolas on there, but I wasn't sure, and I can go back and look at the cost sheet, but,
Yeah, we ended up with one pergola
Okay.
because of costs.
okay,
And if we wanted to spend more money at one of the shade sale locations, we could do a pergola there.
okay. And one of the other questions I got was, how do we determine where we were going to put shade sails? Because, you know, some places have them and some don't. Was that based on surrounding
Well,
existing
so
trees or?
one of the issues that we encountered was overhead power lines.
Okay,
And that's one of the reasons, and we walked the site, our team walked the site with Rocky Mountain Power and investigated whether they could put some utilities underground, and the answer was no, unless we paid for that, which is really expensive. So shade sails and the pergola were all subject to height limitations, and we also tried to distribute the shading as much as we could across the dispersed parking area to provide multiple shade locations. And they typically are at the places where there's a bulb out or of some sort, you know, as opposed to over a sidewalk or anything like that.
okay. And then I was wondering if you or Carly remembered how much added money we put into the budget. Was it as high as $1 million? Yeah,
Was.
okay. Okay, thanks. That just helps me remember. And then at what point should we as a council kind of ask for just a reminder on what we think our anticipated annual maintenance costs will be for this, just to make sure that we know that's built in, because we know historically some of our predecessors, didn't do that, and we probably want to make sure to do that.
Are you asking me?
Yeah, well, yeah.
Yeah, sure. No,
Yeah. Yeah.
I wasn't
Or
sure if you
Carly,
went, I wasn't
all
sure if
of
you went philosophical there or
I couldn't
not.
remember, yes, well, that too, yeah. That too.
Yeah, it's a great question. And if you recall earlier,
Yeah.
like as we were developing to get to this point, we did have maintenance costs.
Yeah,
And in talking with Levi about this, it's at least, let's say we built it as we're showing you here today, it's at least one full-time employee, full-time,
Okay.
to maintain the amenities. We won't really know until we get into it, because there's vegetation there and vegetation requires a lot of effort if you don't want it to become a weed patch or die.
Yeah.
And I'm not trying to be, simplistic, but it's the truth. And it's one of the challenges, and Levi, I think Carly has already gotten one vegetative
A
maintenance.
grounds person.
A grounds person who's working on weeds in the streets, for lack of a better word.
plus we all know when we get, because our streets are the corridor for our stormwater, and anybody with a yard in town knows, like when your lot floods, what you get is weed seed, a lot of weed seed, so we know, that's.
So one employee, I'm not sure what the number you would use for average maintenance worker, is it 50,000, 60,000?
Probably 50 plus, it's about 100,000 a year.
You think that would cover the Emma section too, or just these? Okay. And then obviously, and then I take it, maintenance in terms of lights and other, plant replacement and everything else is going to be on top of that.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll let someone else ask questions. I just,
And the budget that we received from UDOT didn't incorporate any sort of ongoing maintenance costs. We didn't get a grant for that. It would be totally absorbed by the city.
yeah, I mean, I feel like from the time we started discussing it, we were kind of trying to guess what that fee, what that amount would be. But I figure as we're getting closer here, that's probably changed. So good for us to be aware of.
Yeah, I don't know if we haven't updated
Yeah.
since you
No,
last looked at it.
Yeah.
no, but we will, as soon as we know where we're going exactly, or pretty close to exactly, we'll be able to tell that. And right now, Levi, and I think it's at least one full-time person, and their job would be to take care of that downtown, and then we can figure out what an average annual yearly cost might be for light bulbs or plant replacements, or once every 10 years for a new shade sale, or, whatever the right number is. I'm not saying that's the right number right now, but it might be. In talking to our landscape architect, we could get 10 years out of one.
Something to consider that I know is probably not the most effective thing, but there may be businesses in town that would like to adopt a, plant section and have them be a part of that. maintenance process? I know that that's probably not ideal, because then you have to
It's like
rely
pay
on
into a
people.
fund, like a common fund,
Yeah.
where we kind of do that, so they don't have to take on the burden, but they can like contribute to the cost. Be great.
Something to think about.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Yeah.
Anybody else, questions for Chuck? Kaylin?
So I noticed the lighting spec indicates that they're at 3,000 Kelvin. And we recently did a trial of some streetlights, some LED streetlights, and the 3,000 Kelvin was not that well received. And I see that this fixture is available in 2,700 and 2,200. So I wonder if that could be considered. I don't know if it affects the price and if there'd be the opportunity to do a demo as well.
Well, I'll find out the answer to that one. That's, and to be perfectly honest with you, with all that's been going on, I never heard the conclusion of the streetlight testing program.
We can address
an
that.
update. An
We're
update
going to
on
do a demo on 2,200 soon, like in
Yeah,
the
I
next
think
couple
we're
weeks.
getting it like today or tomorrow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It would be interesting to see these other fixtures as well to just, to compare if it's not unreasonably expensive, because just maybe there's differences
Right.
that aren't in the light quality that isn't just captured by a couple numbers.
And I don't, if you don't feel the need to, I don't think we have to resolve that issue tonight.
Oh, yeah.
Because we can, I'll get back with our electrical engineer, find out if there's a reason why he put 3,000 in, except that 3,000 was for a time kind of
The number.
the number.
Yeah.
And I'll ask him, you know, if, actually it's her now, I'll ask her about the lowering it to the 2,200 or to the other.
22 is what we're looking at for all the streetlights in the city.
Yeah, my gut feeling is it'll be okay if that's the direction council wants to go, but I'll confirm that and get back with you. And in terms of trying out the lights, that would be a different, that'd take a little longer to make that happen. It's probably possible.
Right, and as I'm saying this, I'm realizing that, as I understand it, this construction may be phased, so there may be like a couple blocks that are done, and if
Right.
the
Lessons learned?
lessons learned,
Yeah, absolutely. I would, yeah.
Okay. The trash receptacles are drawn as single circles, so I'm wondering if recycling is going to be accommodated in that, or what the plan is there.
It's whatever you want it to be.
Recycling needs to be a part of that.
Yeah, you know, honestly, I didn't think about that. But if you're looking for, now we'll have to figure out what the preference is, you know, if it's, you know, 4 different containers, or it's one of these that has multiple ports in it, or whatever you want. Yeah, that's absolutely doable.
Great.
Yeah.
Right. I don't have an answer offhand, but I just like it to be considered.
Oh, yeah, we will. No, that's, and you know, what we're going to do is, I typically have one of my staff members, the reason I don't write everything down is I'd rather concentrate on what we're saying, but we'll review this tomorrow, and we'll make sure that this stuff gets addressed.
Great. So I didn't see a planting plan in this set. Did I miss that? I see the narrative descriptions of like how plants will be chosen.
Did you look at the, and again, I apologize, at the blow-up per sheets for the landscape plans? Did they not give the,
It didn't seem like they,
because here's
I
the
don't think it
overall.
was that detailed.
it didn't seem like they had plants on them. They had symbols for some of the
Kinds of rock.
static amenities, but I didn't see plants.
Yeah, then they're not there, if you
Okay.
didn't see them. Are you interested in seeing a planting plan later?
Yes, I am.
I would be
Well,
interested
I mean,
too.
I don't need, I can just, if you want to send it to me, and I,
Well, I'm not even sure that we have the planting plan now,
okay,
but when we generate it, we can send it to you, council, for consideration. Yeah, I don't have a
Yeah.
problem with that.
I was just curious how the narrative about the shade trees translated into specific placements. And I realize that at 30% you may not be there yet.
We are in some locations, because I have seen the specific plans, like on that one I was just showing you for the median plan.
Yeah,
They've got, you know, drought tolerant shade tree here and a shade struck sail over here. And we could locate, this is Center Street and the median parking. So there's one there, but that's not a complete planting plan, I know that, but, so we've given consideration, so. When we get that planting plan, we'll be happy to either come back and talk to you or just send it to council and you can comment on that.
Okay, great. And then I appreciate that we had grand ambitions initially and that it's on some streets it's been scaled back a little bit. And with the elimination of some median parking, we've potentially lost some median landscaping as well. Yeah. And so looking at those streets, I realized that where there's driveways and there's angled parking, where you're making a right turn, there is potentially a space for other planters adjacent to the edge of the street. So like, I think 200 North might show an example of this. Or you might have ones in mind.
We do have some places where we have done that. Other places, like coming off of Main Street's difficult because of the size of the vehicles and the radiuses to put too much right there.
Right, I was thinking more mid-block. If there might be other opportunities for just to have those bulb outs mid-block to help with the traffic calming and.
So we have it on 200 North, right?
I can't pull. This Chromebook just bogs down with this file size.
And I apologize too. But we do on 200 North. We have a mid-block bulb out on either side to reduce that distance, because I looked at it yesterday, to reduce that reduce the distance pedestrians have to walk, as well as a traffic calming device. So we did it on 200 North because that one matched up pretty nicely because there's not a driveway on the south, but there was that big driveway on the north. We can look at it. The reason we didn't do it more was a function of money. I remember the discussion now.
Okay.
But that being said, we can take another look at that.
Okay, I'd appreciate it.
Yeah.
And I could also look at it too and give you more specifics. Oh, you're going to say something else?
No, I was going to say I could find a better way to get you this digital data if that would be helpful.
It's fine on my desktop.
Okay.
It's just, I can't it just chokes if I try to scroll around here. And then finally, in the, as far as design was done in the parking structure, there was going to be EV charging. And I realized that I don't know if I brought this up for the downtown dispersed parking. And in the period of time since we last discussed this, the Inflation Reduction Act was passed, and there may be a fair amount of money coming down the pike to support vehicle electrification. So I wondered if provision for that could be thought of as an option in these plans.
And we've as a team, as a project design team, we've talked about that, and without it's a little speculative right now, but yet I agree with you that it's potentially some funding coming our way. And I don't think it's a big deal, just to modify some locations. I mean, there's cost to it, but we'll have to look at it in a site-specific scenario. But I think there's enough of these streets that we could find some places to put in a couple here and a couple there. It's wiring.
Yeah. Or I didn't know if just putting in the conduit now.
And okay, we'll look at that. And maybe it becomes that the first 2 streets we do, or 3 streets we do, we don't know enough yet. But then by the time we go to the other ones, we do know how much money is coming this way, and council can say, go spend $50,000 or because you got $50,000 or whatever the number is on that. Yeah, well, I'll ask their question, but if we spend the money and then the money doesn't become available, then it's.
You mean if you spend the money on design or you spend the money
on installing it?
Oh.
Yeah, but I still don't think it's a big thing. I mean, I don't know what those cost, the ones that were put here, because Rocky Mountain Power put in the ones that are on the city streets now, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't know, off my top of my head, I don't have a construction number.
Right.
But putting in conduit isn't a big thing, yeah.
Right. And I think it varies depending on whether the DC fast chargers or
Yeah,
not?
yeah,
Okay, well, I'd appreciate you and the design team looking at that, and
we'll do that.
great.
Anybody else?
I have a few more if no one else does, but I'll let someone else go first. Okay, I guess it's me. Chuck, can you remind me, what's the standard height of a light pole? Just because I'm thinking, you know, some of these we're going to get are 12s and 20s, right? I didn't know what standard was.
It's about 30.
Okay, cool. It gives me some idea. And then,
And we started out wanting to put in 18s,
Oh,
but because of
okay.
the overheads, we went to 12s. And there are 12s in town in places, so it's, in a way, it's better to
Yeah.
have it lower.
okay, and it is a mix of 12s and 20s, right? Is that my understanding?
Yeah, that's
Okay.
right, depending on the locations.
Okay. Then the design for 100 South, only because, you know, one of our pipe dream capital projects was 100 South green infrastructure. These changes that'll be happening on 100 South, are they consistent? Should we ever find the money?
Minor modifications.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, the
Okay.
100 South is primarily a restriping program.
Okay. I mean, I know it has the bump outs, and I didn't know if
That's
they
some bump
would,
outs,
they
but-
would fit into that original vision. I can't remember what the original.
We'd have to modify the
Drawing.
original, which we have those construction drawings, but it's not a major modification.
Okay. And then, can you just recap? I know it's kind of in here, but I was having trouble wrapping my head, and I thought you could probably summarize better for me. Help me understand. I think when we initially all started with this, you know, we were looking at pictures of other communities, and we were having schematics of Main Street, and, you know, a lot of us have all these concerns about intersections at Main Street and safety issues. And so we had, you know, some pictures in our mind, or maybe just some initial drawings with bump outs at the actual intersections on Main. And I know now we only have them like along 100 West and 100 East, aside from that pre-existing Center Street. So can you just remind me why it ended up that we couldn't have those at Main?
UDOT doesn't want them.
Okay, okay.
I mean, that's the frank answer.
It's funny because they helped fund our downtown study, and they were part of that too.
Yeah, I understand,
Okay,
and they never really liked the bump outs on Main Street at all because and I could make an argument that it's a good thing, but they worry that it slows the through traffic down.
okay. If you're listening, UDOT, it would be nice to tell us that ahead of time. Okay, and then just a question about ADA slots, because I appreciated what you wrote about, you know, usually have one per 25 parking stalls, and a few of the constraints in a few places. But can you remind me, when you put in an ADA slot, are you often trying to pair two together? Because I noticed on some of our streets, we're pairing two together, and I just didn't know. I know that probably saves space and makes it easier for you to get more slots, but obviously you think about utility for people who need them too. Like, is there ever any way to have one at one end of the street and one at the other end? I mean, I don't. No.
Yeah, so we tried to be strategic in placing them by
Yeah.
putting, because when you get out, you've got to get up to the sidewalk, right?
Yeah.
And if you got the two that are right next to each other, that ADA ramp is very close. And ADA ramps in Moab are a real challenge because every one of these intersections seems to be custom made. And going in and making it compliant is really a lot of custom work. If you're saying to me, could we try and disperse them more? We'll take another look at it
Okay.
and try.
Yeah, I don't know if it's doable, but I guess, and I mean, this is just kind of a few things I've heard, but obviously, I guess it would be helpful if anyone listening who needs that kind of access has strong opinions. Yeah, let us know, because it may just be me as someone who hasn't reached that point in my life where I've been lucky enough to not need them. It may just be that I assume that would be better, but I may be totally wrong.
Yeah, and actually, I've been a proponent with the designers to spread them out as well,
Okay,
even though I don't use them either yet. But
okay, yeah, not.
but I have made an effort to try and disperse them, and when it gets down to the nuts and bolts of design, we may be able to do it and we may not be able to. But at these locations, we think we've done enough engineering that we can make them work at these locations.
Okay, and I guess the last question was just, somebody was asking me, you know, I know at one point we were saying one of our goals was sustainability and, I mean, we have some components in here, but are there any other missed opportunities that you see us on the verge of where it would be easy to either prepare for something that could be a more sustainable upgrade coming, or, I don't know, just to make sure we're not missing anything where we could be doing more?
I don't know, you know, we've tried to include the stormwater catchments where we could. We've tried to use LED lights. You know, we didn't go solar power because it was actually a lot cheaper because we're participating in that regional program. But the reality is stormwater doesn't just go into these basins. It's going to go into the creeks and into the river. And we're planting some shade trees for cooling effect, and those shade sails are also an opportunity to provide shade, you know, and we received good feedback on them from a lot of people in terms of if you can't have trees, because the other thing is trees require maintenance, and they can, so the shade sails or something. So I'm not sure what opportunities for sustainability we've missed. I mean, those are kind of
I'm thinking the shade sails are in enough places in town. They've been tested with our winds. I mean,
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I know they're tensile tightened, but, you know, yeah.
No, there've been, I
Yeah.
mean, the food court, they've had pretty good, unless someone knows different, they've had pretty good success with those stout structures that they have there.
Okay, and I'm guessing we all just need to mentally prepare ourselves that we might start with a nice landscaped bulb out, but a flood might deposit on it and it'll reemerge.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. That was it. Yeah.
Any other questions for Chuck before I ask for a motion? All right. I will ask for a motion to direct staff to proceed to construction documents in the general conformity with the 30% design documents and consideration of what council brought before you tonight.
So moved.
Motion made by Ronnie, second.
Second?
Seconded by Kalen. Any more discussion, Ronnie?
No.
Kalen?
Just thanks for all your work on this.
Welcome.
Anybody else? All right, I'll call for the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0.
Thank you.
All right, next. You're still here, Chuck.
I am, it's a good place to be.
All right, so the next item is to award of the contract for construction of the Moab dispersed parking project at Emma Boulevard.
So this is dispersed parking funding from hotspot funding. We came to council, and I should have said this earlier in the last item. We had come to you with the 30% plans then and made some modifications based on your input, and then we proceeded forth to construction drawings. And then we went to bid. Now we've received bids that came in under our engineer's estimate, which was a milestone because of the way things have been lately after COVID, you know, the dark year. And we would recommend approval to LeGrand Johnson Kilgore Companies as the qualified low bidder on the project. And if council awards, we're going to sit with them next and try and figure out the schedule. I don't think we can get it done by the closing of asphalt plant, which is typically Thanksgiving. So we're going to make some decisions on what we can do that makes sense. And maybe we do the concrete work during the winter and then plantings next spring and asphalt next spring. So the good news is it's not a major thoroughfare. Most of that work will be on Emma, which gets some people traveling it, but not a lot. And we'll, you know, keep the pedestrian path open with the detours and such as much as we can, because we're going to have to pull out sections to redo the drainage in places and the new grades. But I just wanted to let you know that it's not, if we could get it done by this season, we will, but I'm not sure we can, and the contract's written that way. So we'll meet with LeGrand Johnson and work that out.
Questions or motion? Kalen?
So since it came in under the probable construction cost, does that mean that there's more money available for the downtown core dispersed parking?
Potentially. Yeah, our contract with UDOT is 5.7 million, and out of that comes our engineering and then construction. So we're kind of keeping a running tally of costs to date, and we'll continue to do that. So that by the time that, you know, this project's done, assuming no change orders, which, you know, is not really a good assumption, but assume no significant change orders, which may be a good assumption, then we'll know by the time we get ready for bid, especially since we're going to phase it, how much money is available for those for the rest of the projects. Yeah.
Motion.
I move to award the Moab Dispersed Parking Project, Emma Boulevard Project construction contract to Kilgore Companies in the amount of $901,335 and authorize the mayor to sign the notice of intent to award.
Thank you. Second?
I'll second.
Seconded by Tawny. Discussion, Kalen?
Nope.
Tawny?
Nope.
Anybody else? All right, I'll call for the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, 5-0.
Great.
There you go.
Thank
More
you.
work for you to do.
It keeps me young.
All righty, and our last item on the agenda is the item, it's new business item 8.2, a proposed resolution 2522, a resolution approving the extension of the conditionally approved Lawrence Minor subdivision at 479 Bowen Circle, Moab, Utah, 84532, Moab City Resolution 3121. And Corey's here to talk about this. This is basically an applicant, my understanding, is an applicant that has let their application lapse twice. The council initially has approved this application twice. And so now the applicant is asking for a one-time extension. And my understanding is that if that extension lapses, then they will have to come back and reapply again. If you choose to deny this, you need to come up with some findings of facts in order to deny that. And so we would probably have to go through the process that we've gone through in the past. So, Corey, why don't you go ahead?
I think that was a great review of the history on this, series of resolution approved items. One clarification is that the item is only lapsed technically once and has received 2 approvals. So what we're looking at now is an extension on the second approval. And this, in nature, is really just an administrative function for that kind of individual property owner right of a minor subdivision, and then the continuation of that with that extension.
Questions? Motion.
I move to approve Resolution 25-2022, a one-time one-year extension of the Lawrence Minor Subdivision, Moab City Resolution Number 31-2021, conditionally approving the minor subdivision of property located at 479 Bowen Circle, Moab, Utah, 84532.
Thank you, Kalen. Second?
I'll second it.
Seconded by Jason. Discussion, Kalen?
Nope.
Jason?
Nope.
Anybody else?
Thanks for answering my questions, Corey.
Sure.
All right, I'll call for the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes 5-0. Thank you, Corey.
Thank you, everyone.
All right, that's it with our normal agenda items tonight. And we'll move on to city manager updates.
Which one is, I feel like there are too many. I could do both. Just use one. Okay. All right, good evening, everyone. I have a few updates and announcements to go over with you. First, Kaylin, Ronnie, and I will be traveling to the CAST meeting next week in Breckenridge. This is the Mountain Towns 2030 meeting. I believe that's true. Yes, the Mountain Towns one.
Right.
And these CAST meetings are really terrific because it's an opportunity to speak with peers in other gateway and resort communities and get ideas and feedback on how they manage their municipalities. And it's also just a recommitment and a refresher on the sustainability commitments that we've made with these other groups. The Future Summit for our community visioning effort will be held on Monday, September 19th from 5:30 to 7 p.m. at the Mark. This will be a celebration of the visioning process thus far, and then they will also be launching the 6 strategic pillars that will shape the final vision and the strategic action plan. So it's going to be interactive. You can do polling there. There's going to be food and everything like that. So if you're interested, please register at the project website, and we'd be happy to have you participate. Another item that I'm happy to announce is that we've hired a sustainability director. Her name is Alexi Lamb. Alexi is coming to us from Utah State University in Logan, and where she served as the sustainability coordinator. She's going to fit in great with the city. It'll be really wonderful to have someone in that position again. A couple updates on some prior announcements that I've made regarding the speeding enforcement blitz that everyone, UHP and Moab PD jointly conducted over Labor Day. I have some numbers. I don't really know what I was expecting. Thousands of people being pulled over. So I don't. So it was, as a reminder, it was on September 2nd from 12 p.m. to 5 p.m. They had 9 officers and troopers working like in the area. They issued a total of 16 speeding citations, 2 citations for red light violations, 1 crosswalk citation, 3 seatbelt citations, and 7 warnings for other moving violations.
Glad I wasn't here.
So a lot of work in 5 hours.
You catch me speeding.
I know. I was on my best behavior, which I think is the point. And then just regarding kind of a flood update, I wanted to just take the opportunity to extend my thanks and gratitude to 2 groups of people as we start to emerge from this flood recovery. The first group of people include the dozens of community members who have taken the initiative to organize or to participate in some trail cleanups and restoration work. Some of those I know who were organizing, and forgive me if I leave people out I'm just not aware of, are Colin Topper, Mark Howe, Cara Dowenrend, the folks at Trail Mix, and Maddie Logowitz. And just I want to thank everyone for their love of the Parkway and for their willingness to come out on Saturdays and evenings to pitch in and clean up. The second group that I want to thank are the city staff, who have been working pretty much around the clock to protect public safety, to get information out, to clear debris, to help assess the damage and be a resource to the community. So department directors such as Chuck Williams, Levi Jones, Lisa Church, Obi Tejada, Barry Ellison, Annie McVeigh, and Chief Garcia should definitely be recognized. Team leads at Public Works include like Lane Gilson, Conrad Unido, Mark Madsen, he's with the Parks Department, plus all of the employees of Public Works, Parks, Sewer, who have been working on it. There are many of them, so I won't go through the list, but I just want to thank them for their commitment to the city, and I've been really proud to work with them over the past couple weeks. That's all.
Well, thank you too, Carly, for overseeing all of that. It was a big couple of weeks, and you did a great job.
Thank you.
Thanks. Is that it?
Yes.
All right. Oh, better get close to the mic. We're going to move on to council updates. We'll start with you, Jason.
All right. Since our last meeting, I attended a Responsible Recreation Board meeting, and they are doing some great things with getting the word out to locals and visitors on how to be good stewards of the land, and they got some good things coming up. They applied for a grant, and they received a grant to buy a Jeep so that they can actually go out on the trails and interact with people, which I think is a really good thing. They're working on videos on responsible recreation, and they got just a lot of really good things going on. So, and then, let's see, I attended, with Kaylin, we attended an economic development strategy meeting, which was put on by the Economic Development Department and the Travel, Moab Grant County Travel Department, and it was just kind of a collaboration of a lot of different people talking about kind of strategies for where we're going in the future, what we want to see, you know, what we can do to promote Moab while promoting our goals, you know, and our objectives. And it was It was a really good meeting where we kind of just, kind of strategized about how to proceed in the future. And then I also attended a Zoom meeting with the Utah Department of Tourism and UTIA and with the National Park Service to discuss their concerns with the National Park Service overtime entry. They've been seeing, they've been seeing like about a 20% drop in visitation to arches, and they're trying to figure out get to the bottom of why that is and what's going on. There's that drop, whether it's timed entry or other factors that could be playing into that. And I think that they agreed to meet. They asked for the Park Service to come up with some numbers, and then I think they're going to meet again in a few weeks to discuss what that is and where's that. Let's see. Ronnie and I attended a Grand County EMS budget meeting, which was kind of a broad stroke meeting of where we're going to be at for next year and what we thought was going to be, and kind of directing the Grand County EMS staff to create a budget according to where we saw trends going and what we thought we needed to happen in next year and in 2024. Kind of start preparing for that. It's kind of interesting that if we order ambulances now, we probably won't get them until 2024. So it's really kind of making us look not just a year out, but 18 months out, and if not a little bit longer. And that's about it. So.
Thanks, Jason.
Mm-hmm.
Connie?
Okay, I attended a HASU meeting, and it was extremely short for me because I'm an ex officio, I don't vote. There was just director's report and financials, and they went into closed session. But one highlight that HASU did get some tax credit in order to build their 32-unit apartment building at Arroyo Crossing, so that was a major step. And on September 27th will be the first open house for CR's first new homes at Arroyo Crossing. So
When is that? September?
September 27th, and I didn't write down the time, so I'll
Let me
find
know.
out for you.
Yep.
I will. I attended a museum meeting, and it was kind of interesting. We talked about amending our bylaws to bring them to this century. They've not been updated since the 1960s.
What? Who?
The bylaws for the museum.
Oh.
And the way the museum operates has... There was a very active museum community in Moab in the 60s, and there was a lot more pomp and circumstance and events. So I think we are looking at amending our bylaws to at least reflect today. So, and many of you may know Victoria Fugit. She passed away earlier or late last month, I believe. She was a longtime Moab artist. She was a supporter of the museum, and she was truly beloved by the museum community and the community in general. And I think the nicest thing I read about her was a very beautiful life well lived. Mm-hmm. So she will be missed. I attended a bit of a fiasco, Canyonlands Healthcare Special Service District meeting. At the last minute, the Grand Center needed to change the room that we met in. And so I went and I got the key, and I sent everyone an email, and what they told me the name of the room was the library. We're going to move you to the library. So I sent everybody an email, and I said, go in the front doors. It's the first door on the right. It's the library. Everybody except two of us went to this library. So it was 20 minutes late starting, or 25 minutes late. But it was fun. The EMS and the district did agree on the sales tax split. 53% will go to the Canyonlands Healthcare Special Service District.
57.
No, it's 53.
53.
It's 57 and 43.
Did I write them down backwards?
Yes.
Oh. Okay, sorry.
Nope.
I wrote them down backwards. It's a 3 and a 7 somewhere. Anyway, that negotiation worked out pretty well. The county has not voted on it yet, but, and it was decided between EMS and the district boards. The free clinic was supposed to give us an update on what's going on, except they went to this library. So we'll do that at a later date. And on Thursday, I met with Ben and Carly and Senator Lee's staff. I can't remember his last name. Joel
Brown.
Brown, okay. And we just chatted about the flood and what we needed from our national delegation, and he promised to give us some insight onto what kind of funding was available and the best ways to access that. And then he was going to clean up the parkway in his really nice, expensive shoes.
He might have had some sneakers in the car.
He might have had some work boots. Yes, he might have.
Is that it?
That's it.
All right, thanks, Tawny. Ronnie?
Let's see. I don't have a lot. We had a legislative policy committee meeting for ULCT yesterday, and they were working on some things on short-term rentals, draft resolution. They are looking for input from elected officials on the survey they currently have out. So if you haven't, please go to the Friday Facts email from Cameron and ULCT and fill that out, because that will help them out. I did have a few little quickie things that just crossed my desk just for you guys and the public, and that was, I think most people who are affected know they can contact the Mosquito Abatement District and get emails, but it has kind of been critical if you're in the downtown area, or at least this old part around City Hall. I think this will be the 4th fogging for mosquitoes in this area. And they're planning to fog again tomorrow morning at 7 a.m. So please do contact Mosquito Abatement if you aren't getting those emails, because it's really helpful to have a heads up the day before so you aren't running out trying to close windows if that's something that you care about. And the other thing was, I don't know about you guys, but I've known multiple people who've gotten bad cases of poison ivy from cleaning up flood debris. So just a reminder to anyone who's susceptible, if you have a rash you can't explain, please maybe check with a health professional about that, because they can do something to help with the grief, but also be aware if it came into your yard or your property and you've gotten a case, it's still in your yard or property and you could be re-exposed. So there are people in the community who can help you understand it, but please know there is medical relief for that if you've been suffering. Thanks.
Ronnie, would you mind mentioning our meeting on Thursday?
Okay. Well, I was going to report on it after the fact, but tomorrow we are having a visit to the UMTRA site with the National Park Service and members of the crew out at UMTRA, along with members of the steering committee. And one of the things we're discussing is kind of site futures and legacy management. And when you look at closing a site, you have to start working through the process of where the property may eventually end up, and that's in part why we're meeting with the Park Service, because one of the things you look at is, are there federal agencies who are potentially interested in that property? It's an opportunity for the Park Service to tour and ask some questions. I can't remember if there's more on the agenda than that. Do you recall anything else, Joette?
Yeah, but we'll be talking about it at the next meeting.
And then afterwards we'll report on it. Yeah.
Thank you. Kaylin.
Just to follow up on that, there's a product called Zanfel, which surprisingly many people aren't aware of, but it removes the poison ivy oils after it's bonded with your skin, like days later. So it's the only thing that I'm aware of that will actually get rid of it.
A similar product called Technu. So there's some out there, yeah.
Right. Well, Technu is to wash it off within a certain limited period of time, like 8 hours. But if you miss that window, there is a product.
Excellent.
And it's better.
We're here for your poison ivy and poison oak needs.
Yes. I attended a CAST meeting in Salida, and there was lots of good information, but one tidbit is that short-term rentals are a big deal in some other communities. Breckenridge has 80% of their housing stock utilized as short-term rentals. And other communities, like, people say they don't want to be like Moab, but Moab is at least well ahead of the curve for some other communities. So a few of these other cities have hired economic firms, consultants like BAE, but not BAE in their cases, to look at the economic burdens that short-term rentals impose on their community in terms of both lost opportunities for workforce housing, the job generation for sub-living wage jobs as a result of the visitation that these short-term rentals create, and or the unpaid administrative costs for the short-term rentals. And then, depending on the community, they'll develop a specific dollar amount based on one or more of these factors, and then they're imposing them as annual fees. So unlike with our Wahoo, they are an annual fee applied to all short-term rentals. So that was interesting to me, that this seems to be an emergent strategy for addressing some of the costs that short-term rentals create for communities. And then as sort of another sort of less tangible takeaway from this is just the extent to which having a large proportion of a community's homes be short-term rentals or second homes, even though their owners can't necessarily vote, it creates a large economic constituency that throws their weight around during elections. So it made me appreciative of the extent to which we still have an intact community of residents. I attended the Moab Area Housing Task Force. Tawny covered some of those takeaways from that, but Moab Community Gardens is doing a community garden out there as well, mostly for residents, but some others. The Utah Housing Corporation is on board to do a development for the 100 to 120% AMI bracket. Noel, the new Vista at the county, is taking the lead on the affordable housing plan update, so hopefully that'll be moving along. And they have consulted with BAE to do a nexus study to possibly do a similar work to what we did with R3 and R4, but across all their zones. So that should be interesting. Middle school does have spaces for public meetings, and apparently they're nice. And so the school district rep was there and just wanted to point that out, so I thought I would pass that along. And that if there's public meetings that you want to engage parents and kids, that having them at the middle school as opposed to some other venue might be worthwhile. On December 5th, there's going to be a housing fair at the Mark. It's going to kick off some winter housing education series. I attended the Community Renewable Energy Agency board meeting, and we now have sort of a timeline of engagement efforts with the member community. So I promise very soon I will bring you something more specific to talk about from this board. Attended the Travel Council meeting today. Jason was there as a business rep, as he always is. And there was a sort of vigorous discussion about advertising priorities and basically what characteristics of visitors we want to emphasize and the best advertising venues and spending strategies to attract them, and relative merits of fly-in visitors versus drive-in visitors. So there was a number of different opinions, but I think the upshot of this is that the county commission gets the ultimate say, and they asked for a few options for them to consider. And then there's also a discussion about TRT and TRCCA recommendations, which will be developed over the next month for also for submission to the county commission. I attended the University of Utah dinner. There was a whole busload of people from the U as well as USU, including the president, Taylor Randall. And it was a great opportunity to engage with him. Carly was there as well. And it was at the Bistro, so one of the nicer venues to have a meet and greet. And it was really great to talk to him about, he's only been in this position for a year, but he's really excited to explore ways to engage more in communities outside the Wasatch Front in Salt Lake City. I have specifics that I can talk with staff about, but the one takeaway was that he thinks it'll be most effective is if it's generated from the ground up as opposed to the top down. So maybe there's more opportunities there than have been realized in the past. That's what I've got.
Thank you, Kaylin. Luke?
Yeah, don't have a ton. I participated in the Mill Creek Parkway cleanup last Thursday, which was kind of their final day. And they had really tremendous turnout from the community, so thank you everybody who participated in that. They managed to do a lot of really incredible work. There was a trail mix meeting earlier today. There's going to be a goat head pulling at the Moab brand trails this Thursday from 5:30 to 7:30. Hawks Glide Trail building begins tomorrow and will continue every Wednesday and Thursday until completion. There will be prizes for volunteers. Those are to be determined. And September 17th, they'll be celebrating National Public Lands Day by beginning the building of a new trail up by the stock tanks up in Sand Flats. So if you'd like to participate in that, that starts at 9 a.m. And then the Soup Bowl is happening this Friday. All proceeds will support the Multicultural Center, and that's happening at the Multicultural Center. I believe the event is from 4 to 6, and you can purchase tickets online if you'd like to register early. But that's all I have.
Great, thanks, Luke. I just have a couple of things too. This afternoon, Carly and I met with Kendall Laws, who is overseeing the PLIPCO at the state level, and he wanted to talk to us about timed entry at Arches. It was a really good meeting. There was a lot of quantitative data that they would like to receive so that they can get a sense of the impacts of timed entry. We talked about how we're not convinced that timed entry is the reason why visitation is the only reason why visitation is low in Moab. They will be meeting again with the Park Service in October, and they also want to have a meeting with the council and other local elected officials to get our input on, how timed entry is going. When I meet with you all in the next couple of weeks, I think we need to have a conversation about this. I mean, I would like to recommend drafting a letter in support of at least continuing the pilot through next year and seeing how it goes. I think this year was kind of a interesting year based that we're coming off of the pandemic. I wonder if our visitation is going to be different next year. So I think it would be good if we could support the pilot for another year and maybe make some recommendations of what the Park Service could do to maybe make it even a better program. So I'll talk to you guys when we meet more about that and see what your opinion is. As you know, the flood, it continues to be an issue. There's been continued media coverage this week, which is good. We want this to continue to be out there in the public, in the state. So I'll be continuing to do those kind of things as they come up. We'll be meeting with Colette Cox tomorrow, and I'm not quite, she's with the governor's office.
I think the economic branch.
Yeah, and she's going to be talking to us about potential opportunities for funding. I think mostly for businesses in town, so that should be a productive meeting. And then she'll be in town on Monday as well. If anybody's interested in meeting with me on Monday, that'd be great. I know Ronnie and Kaylin and Carly will be out, so if Jason, Tawny, or Luke want to participate, let me know. On Friday, I'll be joining the Rotarians at Rotary Park to welcome the Colorado Tour Group that comes to town, and they provide a lot of support for the community. So that'll be fun.
It's
And-
tomorrow, isn't it?
Is it tomorrow? I thought it was Friday.
It's tomorrow.
I have it on my calendar as Friday. Anyway, I'll find out. Tomorrow, I am meeting with, the AOG is putting on a Unified Economic Development Plan meeting. I'm not quite sure what that is, but I plan to attend to find out. So more to come on that. And that's it from me. All right, motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All right, we got a motion by Kalen.